Yep,
recording.
it's going. We're good.
Good to go?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to call this meeting to order, the meeting of the budget meeting on Friday, January 22nd. Order. Confirmation of the agenda that the Council of Township of North Huron hereby accepts the agenda for January 22nd, 2021 budget meeting as presented. Do I have, oh, no, I'm going to hand it over to Carson for roll call. Oh, sorry.
You can get a mover and a seconder first.
Yeah, sorry. Do I have a mover? I have Anita moving. Seconder, please. I have Paul seconding. Okay, Carson, your turn.
So that'll be a recorded vote. So Deputy Reeve Sykes currently as absent. So Councillor Falconer. Councillor Falconer. Sorry, I didn't get it. Okay, Councillor Heffer.
Yes.
Councillor Van Hitterson.
Yes.
Councillor Palmer.
Yes.
Councillor McBurney.
Yes.
And Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 6-0.
Disclosure of pecuniary interest. Not hearing or seeing anyone's hands waved, so we'll move on. Just before we go to 4.1, I just want to touch bases, and I don't want to make a conversation. I just want to make a few comments about our budget, because this is about our budget. I do believe, Donna, I'm sure you're listening in. So in the paper yesterday, it said that Morris Turnberry is not going to basically fund anything from this point on. I don't think they paid for last year either. I think last year's is outstanding. The only reason I'm bringing this council at this point in time is because it affects our budget. So Donna, you did take that into consideration. I believe we had that conversation.
Yes, the departments that had the affected revenue didn't include that in the 2021 budget, but we were paid for amounts in 2020, not the full amount, but we did get payment for 2020.
Okay, yeah, okay. So we've taken care of the reduction that there was no conversation. That council just simply decided not to pay us what we've been doing for years. Okay, so as long as we've covered it, I only wanted to bring this. I didn't want to make a conversation out of it. I just wanted to bring it to council's attention to make sure the staff had compensated for it, okay? Okay, 4.1, CAO, Strategic Plan Update. The Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives a report from the CAO dated January 22nd, 2021 regarding the status update of the Township of the 2020 to 2023 status strategic plan for information purposes. Do I have a mover? I have Kevin moving. Do I have a second? I have Paul seconding. How do we have Carson, what's your call? Do the roll call now or let Dwayne speak to it?
You would want Dwayne to present this first.
Okay, thank you. Dwayne, I'm going to hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Your Worship. So just in terms of council's aware, about a year ago, we developed and council adopted a new strategic plan. And the strategic plan was developed by council and staff, and we did receive some input from residents, businesses, and industry. And the strategic plan helps steer the municipality over the years, and it's a reflection of the aspirations of what, as municipality, we hold as our community of communities. It does speak to a vision statement, a mission statement, our values, our principles, our goals, and actions, and as well, and kind of prioritizes, I guess, in terms of the time frame in which those will be achieved. So, and this is important for council in terms of, as a reminder, the short term was identified as 2020, medium term was identified as 2021 to 2022, and long term basically was 2022 to 2023. So those are important time frames to keep in mind. Strategic plans are to be living documents, and it's a good practice to check in on them on a periodic basis. And this is approximately a year, so this is a good time for a check-in, just to look at council is approximately halfway, a little more than halfway through your term at council. Your strategic plan identifies your priorities, and it's just a good opportunity to check in and to see how things are going and see if things are progressing and moving as council intends. In addition to the strategic plan, council was successful in receiving some provincial to undertake a service delivery review. KPMG, as council recall, was retained, and a final report was presented to council last fall. And the service delivery review outlines potential opportunities for the township's considerations, and those primarily fall into 4 categories: to achieve operating efficiency, service level adjustments, alternative service delivery, and opportunities for additional revenue generation. At the time that the strategic plan was adopted, the service delivery review actually had not been completed, and it was actually one of the action items. So good for us as far as we put an action item into our strategic plan, and it was a short-term objective, and we can check that box off. So just again, in terms of just as I've indicated earlier, in terms of it's just a good opportunity for us at this point to check in our strategic plan. It assists in assessing, and in particular for this meeting, in terms of when you're starting to look at and you're nearing what I would suggest kind of getting to the final stages of your budget process, whether the 2021 budget aligns with the plan's goals and objectives, and it also an opportunity for council to ensure that the plan continues to reflect council's priorities. It also serves as a good reminder to staff as to what your priorities are, and ensures that the township's limited resources are aligned with your priorities. And we achieve the goals and objectives through various action items that again are identified in the strategic plan. So as Carson has pulled up here, I have prepared a slideshow which was contained in your council package. And basically what I'm going to do with council's permission is basically walk through the strategic plan at a high level, just to provide you with and the status of the various actions that are identified in terms of where we're at. As you'll see, most of the short-term objectives or action items have been completed or are nearing completion in 2021. Some of the medium-term projects became higher priorities, and actually we've started those ahead of schedule, and subsequently they will be completed, or we're certainly anticipating they're going to be completed ahead of schedule. And then there's other projects, and just one example off the top, for example, is the development of a new human resource manual. So that's one that council has identified as a priority or something for staff to work on. Staff are currently working on that, and as you'll see, and I'll speak to that a little bit more when I get into the status of that. But that's just to give you a high-level snapshot. I think in terms of as we go through and we look at this, where we're at in our strategic plan, it's important to remember that when we adopted the strategic plan, we were not anticipate a pandemic. So that has certainly had an impact in terms of resources available. As far as our existing resources, we've had to shift them and move them in response to the pandemic situation. And I think it's also important to note that over the course of a year, you'll have naturally occurring staffing changes. That is not uncommon, but those staffing changes do, as part of transitioning, things kind of slow a little bit until the staff member has an opportunity to get up to speed and move along. So I think those, again, are just things for council to keep in mind. And as you'll see, I think council should be pleased with the strategic plan in light of all the things that are currently at play. As you'll see, staff have been able to deliver on most of your short-term objectives. And I'd like to thank staff for their loyalty, dedication, and the commitment to council and to the community, especially bearing in mind that as we've been working on the strategic plan objectives, we've been managing this pandemic and situation. So Carson has pulled up the slide presentation there, and Carson, if you could move on. So first goal, just as a reminder, Council's goal is to build a stronger economy through residential growth, retail, commercial, and industrial development, tourism, and thriving agriculture. So in terms of our action items, our first action item, as you'll see, and I know this is difficult to read on the screen, so if you do have it in your package and want to follow along, by all means. So the first is to improve the efficiency and timelines of the development approval system. This is identified as a medium-term objective. Medium term, again, is 2021 to 2022. It's not an initiative at this point that staff have been working on, but staff will be undertaking research on this initiative in 2021. Item 2 is to complete and maintain inventory of properties in the municipality and promote them as appropriate with a focus on municipally owned lands that could be developed. This was a short-term objective, and as council recall, there was a report to council basically doing an inventory and a review of the municipally owned lands and looking at were there any opportunities for those lands to be developed. And staff will continue to update the property inventory as council makes decisions regarding properties. Item 3 is to collaborate with Huron County to promote business development opportunities and tourism in North Huron. This identified a medium-term objective. This is one, for example, where we got a little ahead, and it's a good thing in terms of we made a funding application to the county's local economic development funding program to move forward with a kiosk, information center, and a bus tour proposal. And staff are continuing to monitor and investigate funding opportunities to move this action item forward. That will continue in 2021 into 2022. And in fact, for those who attended yesterday's Economic Development Committee meeting, this was discussed yesterday as one of the potential funding projects or opportunities for the most recently announced RED Economic Development Grant Program. So moving on, development of determine the future related to the Wingham Airport. Council did receive a draft report and directed staff to investigate severing the airport from the agricultural lands. Dollars have been allocated in the draft 2021 budget to sever the airport and create a separate access to the remaining agricultural lands. There was also a discussion by council in terms of working with organizations such as Orange and or the local hospital to ensure provisions remain in place for a heliport pad. That was identified as something that council wanted to ensure was maintained. Staff are currently working on this action item, and there will be a report to council in the very near future to move that action item forward. The next item was to review the current amount of funding being allocated to grants under the North Huron Community Improvement Plan. This was identified as a medium-term project, again, 2021 to 2022. There were funds allocated in 2020 for the Community Improvement Plan, but in light of the COVID situation and perhaps other factors, none of that $40,000 that was in the 2020 budget was spent on community improvement. So as you'll see, and what's being proposed is that the unspent money for the community improvement plan be moved into reserves and then carry forward into our 2021 budget. The program, the other thing I'll perhaps mention is that we have that program has been delivered through basically set deadlines where we've had intake periods in terms of applications received, application reviews, and applications brought to council. In conversations with the clerk, we're looking at moving towards more of an ongoing intake. So basically, it enables individuals to come forward with an application or proposal whenever it works for them. More in terms of us, rather than them fitting our schedule, it enables us to better fit their schedule. And so anyways, there will be a report presented at the end of 2021 as far as where we're at in those community improvement plans. I should also just maybe mention in terms of any community improvement plan applications that we do receive will be reviewed or vetted through the Economic Development Committee, but ultimately council is the approval authority on those applications. So next item is to establish a visitor information center at a physical location in a kiosk. I won't dwell on this at all. This is a long-term project. There was an application to the county, unsuccessful, but we're still continuing to work on that action item. Next was to facilitate development of Hutton Heights. This was identified as short-term initiative. Council did receive a report from BM Ross at the December 7th meeting and has provided direction, and staff are proceeding with the direction that council provided regarding that initiative. Outside of the strategic plan and looking a little bit more at the service delivery review, identified the establishment of annual maintenance fee for building permits. This was identified or has been identified as something as a long-term in terms of something that staff is currently looking into. At this point, no action has been taken on this, bearing in mind that the service delivery review came forward late last fall. But it is something that we will be bringing a report to council for. The preliminary indications from a staff is not recommending charging an annual maintenance fee, but that's a conversation that council can have when the time comes, when that report is brought forward. Moving on, the Wingham Trailer Park. Again, this was not identified specifically in the strategic plan, but it was identified in the service delivery. Has been a discussion topic by council. The timing on this is kind of a short-term, medium-term project in terms of we've been very working on this project in 2020 and we're continuing to work on it into 2021. And just in terms of kind of where we're at with that particular project, just as a reminder, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 environmental work has been completed. As well, the building structures have been removed and the trailer park has been closed by directive of council. Staff are continuing to staff have been working with the environmental firm and moving forward with the scoped environmental impact study has been commissioned. An archaeological assessment study has been commissioned as well. And Ontario Land Survey is currently working on a boundary and topographic survey for the property. And as well, the Townships engineer is working on a servicing design. So as much as there may not appear to be anything happening in terms of, if you look at the physical location of the trailer park, in terms of it looks like there's nothing happening on that project, there actually is a lot happening in the background. There's a lot of activity, a lot of conversations, and a lot of things happening. And again, there will be a report coming to council, and with the intent that we'll be moving forward with a planning or plan a subdivision application at some point in the future. Maitland Estates, again, this isn't a municipal project. This is not a municipal initiative, but it is certainly or has been identified as a council priority. And in terms of, we have it down here as a medium-term project. And the draft plan of subdivision, as council is aware, County Council approved a 6-month extension until July 2nd of 2021. In the background, again, staff have been providing support and fielding questions to advance this development. In the last 2 to 3 months, I would say, there's been a lot of activity happening around this development. Again, it's conversations to move this development forward. It's not a project or initiative that staff are leading or are moving on. Our role is basically to support and help facilitate the development. But as far as, I'll call it shovels in the ground, that's at the hands of the developer themselves. But we're certainly working hard and working with them to move that forward. Another item that was identified in the service delivery review was coordination of local economic development initiatives with the county and aligning with the county's priorities. As you can appreciate, the county has their priorities. As a municipality, we have our priorities. This has been identified as perhaps a conversation that could or may take place. Again, we'll be bringing something to council, a conversation between the Economic Development Committee perhaps and the county's Economic Development Board in terms of where we align with the county's projects and initiatives and where we don't align. And where we do align, then certainly in terms of working collaboratively on those initiatives. But there may be and could be projects that are priority for us that simply may not be a priority for the county. So that's certainly a conversation to take place. Moving on, in terms of the next section is community. Community, again, just as a reminder, the goal is to be a vibrant and welcoming community that is proud of its roots, fosters volunteerism, has strong arts and cultural presence, and supports community initiatives and special events. Our first action item there is to develop a more efficient events approval policy process and market community events in North Huron. This was identified, interestingly, in both the strategic plan, and it also came through the service delivery review. So it certainly has been identified as something very, very much needed. We're at a staff level, we're currently working on finalizing a special events policy that will be presented to council in the very near future. And the idea with the special events policy essentially is subject to council's approval, basically enable projects and developments and events to move forward to the extent possible, where council approval is not required, that we can move on those projects initiatives in a more quick or at a faster response. Next item, develop a process or program to recognize volunteers for their contributions, and I'll jump to the next one, investigate opportunities to be recognized as a youth-friendly community. These are both identified as long-term items, so there's been no activity regarding these two particular action items, simply because there are 2022-2023 projects. Next item, prioritize accessibility in the township's buildings and services. This is an ongoing action item. Your senior management team continues to incorporate an accessibility lens into all the renovations or new construction as is required by the Ontario Disabilities Act. And you will recall, in terms of, we're currently working on or moving forward with renovations to the washroom facilities, for example, at the Public Works property, as well as the fire hall. So we're certainly working in that regard. In addition to that, council's aware of the ramp project that we're currently working on at Town Hall. So it certainly is in the minds and the forefront of staff in terms of moving those forward. Next item, complete a community safety and well-being plan. This is a short-term project. A draft community safety and well-being plan will be presented for council's consideration in 2021. There is a deadline there of July 1st of 2021, so it's definitely something that we'll be getting to you and in front of you early this year. In terms of governance and modernization, our goal there is to be fiscally sustainable, transparent, and forward-thinking municipality that works with its residents and stakeholders to communications and community engagement. First item there is support advocacy efforts for the expansion of high-speed internet. Council's aware in terms of that there have been meeting conversations taking place with Township staff, Economic Development Committee Chair. Lisa Thompson has been involved in at the table, and we've extended invitation to our MPP Ben Lobb. I can assure you, I guess, that advocacy for the expansion of high-speed internet has been ongoing and will be continuing into 2021. And in fact, there was just a recent conversation as of yesterday with the Economic Development Committee in terms of that this is something to continue on and to move forward with. Next is implement Accessibility for Ontarians and Disabilities Act requirements and Ontarians with Disability Act requirements. To implement, those requirements. Staff have participated in creating accessibility, have participated in creating accessible documents training in December 2020. We completed that under the umbrella of the website in terms of what we need to do as staff to ensure that our documents are accessible and can be posted on the website. And again, only documents that are accessible can appear on the website. A phased approach to creating accessible documents has been developed, so it's something again that we're moving forward on. Moving on, support the Associated Municipalities of Ontario advocacy efforts for support of rural community needs. This has been identified as an ongoing item. At one of our council meetings, there was a suggestion or comment made to investigate a potential joint AMO conference delegation with AMO staff and other municipalities regarding joint and severed liability. There was also a previous suggestion or recommendation that in terms of looking at a joint Roma conference delegation and in working with Goderich and Huron East, simply because Goderich and Huron East also own and operate a municipal daycare. Essentially, and I won't go into the detail, but essentially the conversation, the response I received from those two municipalities was that, you know, they were okay with things and didn't feel the need to participate in a joint delegation. So that's where that one stands. In terms of next time, develop a community engagement and communication strategy for the township. This is identified as a medium-term project. And it's just, and this is, for example, where there's a bit of this is a good opportunity, I guess, as far as a check-in with council. Medium term is 2021 to 2022. At the present time, there are in the draft 2021 budget for the development of a community engagement communication strategy. If that is something council wishes to have completed or wishes to prioritize in 2021, then it's suggested consideration be given to allocation of funds for that particular project or initiative. Bearing in mind that it is a 2021-2022 project, so if council decided not to move forward with this project in 2021, there's nothing to say that you can't consider this as part of your 2022 budget process. So I'll just offer that for council, and you can deliberate or discuss that when you get into your second version of your budget. Update the township's digital processes. This is dealing with the website, the online payment options. A demo of the new website will be provided to council members in early 2021, and as well, staff continue to implement Laserfiche electronic records management system. So this was identified as a short-term initiative. It is certainly well underway. It got well underway in 2020, and will be continuing into 2021. But this is, again, is the type of project where there was a lot of work done on the project, but because we had to shift and reallocate some staff resources, you know, to deal with the pandemic situation. Again, there was a lot of progress made on this particular initiative, but it's a project that we have not been able to conclude in 2020, but we're certainly anticipating and we'll be concluding it in 2021. Next item, implement professional development plans for staff. This is a 2021-2022 project, and this actually is going to go very nicely with the new human resource policy that we're currently working on. Once we get the new manual into place, then it's certainly anticipated that we'll be able to move forward with some updated or new some policies, I guess, around that particular action item. There will be a presentation to council very early, in fact, possibly next month, where we will be presenting council with a new manual for consideration. So again, it's moving forward. Moving on, in terms of evaluate the current size and structure of council, this was a 2021-2022 project, and there will be a report presented on this for council's consideration in early 2021. There has been some initial research completed on this, so it's something that staff are currently working on, something certainly that we're moving forward with, and we will be bringing a report to council and seeking some direction. In terms of the next two items, an IT review, and as well replace the recreation management software. In terms of the IT review, this is identified as a long-term project, being 2022 to 2023. Part of moving forward with this particular initiative, as recommended by the Service Delivery Review, is to secure funding to retain a consultant to undertake this. So as far as if the funding becomes available in 2021, then this project may move from long-term to short-term, for example. But if funding does not become available, this may be a 2022, 2023. And if there's been no conversations or announcement regarding potential funding to complete this by 2022, then Council may wish to allocate funds in 2023 for the completion of this, or Council may decide to allocate funds in 2022 if there's no external funding available. So not a conversation that, unless Council decided that they wanted to complete this in 2021, then it certainly would impact the 2021 budget. But if Council is content to leave this until external funding becomes available, then again, this has been identified more as a long-term project. And in terms of the recreation management software, this is a short-term. A software consultant has been retained. Implementation of the new software is currently underway and will be completed in 2021. So in terms of infrastructure, our goal there is to be municipally and well-maintained and thoughtfully planned infrastructure. So these are more what I'll call your capital projects. So again, from a strategic plan perspective, to replace the current standpipe in Wingham, this was identified as something to do in the medium term. Sorry, the cost allocation. There is money that has been there is money proposed in the draft 2021 budget to proceed with the engineering design work and the tendering of the documents for the replacement of the standpipe. We have made application, but again, we have not received any notification either way in terms of possible external funding from either the provincial government or the federal government to move this project forward. So that's something that we'll have to wait, I guess, to see if there is any external funding. But if not, there's certainly things that we will be undertaking and doing in 2021 around this. Develop a fleet replacement schedule. Again, this was a short-term project. A fleet replacement schedule was completed and, as I recall, presented to Council in 2020. There is going to be a report coming forward from Public Works regarding a recreation fleet vehicle and equipment replacement schedule in 2021. Complete infrastructure mapping of all infrastructure. This is identified as a short-term project. We are continuing to gather data to move this one forward. And from a staff's perspective, in terms of it being a short-term project initiative, and in light of everything that's occurred in 2020, staff is, I would say, recommending, I guess, that we look at moving this to more of a medium-term project in terms of a 2021-2022 initiative. There is data gathering is continuing. And when the data when we receive the data, then we have to format it and upload it, and it is a labor-intensive exercise. So that's a consideration. Update the asset management plan, and there's some points there. This has been identified as a longer-term project, again, a 2022-2023. And as much as it's been identified as a longer-term project, it's important for Council to be aware, and as we're reminded, that building condition assessments were complete and presented to Council, and that data has been incorporated into the Township's asset management plan. And staff are continuing to work towards meeting the requirements of Ontario Reg 58817, which is your asset management planning for municipal infrastructure legislation. In terms of next steps related to surplus municipal infrastructure, this has been identified as a medium-term initiative. Again, it's a medium-term, again, being 2021-2022. As council is aware, surplus properties that are currently being looked at or addressed are the Armories building. Council has given direction regarding the airport. The Blythe Public Works property is, it was discussed at our last council meeting, and you're going to see in the revised budget some additional funds for that, if that is in terms of a council priority. And as well, in terms of the Wingham Trailer Park, again, we've already. But I think it's important to note, though, that there was a new sale and disposition land policy that was adopted by council in 2020. We identified that that property needed to be updated. We updated that policy, so that's great that we have that policy in place. So once we receive council direction, then we'll proceed accordingly. In terms of services, their goal there is to offer high quality and well-balanced services that create a sense of belonging, support community well-being, promote safety, encourage healthy and active lifestyles. So in terms of our action items, to continue to be involved in physician recruitment efforts, funds have been allocated or are included in the draft 2021 budget to continue to support the work of the Physician Recruitment Committee. And we do have Councillor Van Hiddersum, who is appointed to that committee in terms of moving that forward. Next item, to continue to deliver public education, fire prevention, and fire service programs. This is an ongoing initiative. Staff, in terms of our public education efforts, because of COVID, our public education efforts have slowed. I wouldn't say have stopped, but it's certainly slowed. Staff will continue to update council in 2021 on the education efforts, and that'll be done through your fire prevention activity reports. Review service agreements with neighboring municipalities and amend as appropriate. This was identified as a short-term, a 2020 initiative. Discussions continued in 2020 regarding new cross-border service agreement with Morris Turnberry. And area municipalities were also invited to engage North Huron in service agreement discussions. The Townships Cross-Border Committee will continue efforts to reach a new cross-border servicing agreement in 2021 at this point in time. Conduct a service delivery review. We've already on this, and this particular action item has been completed. Support local housing initiatives ongoing, and there may be an opportunity to look at affordable housing as part of the Wingham Trailer Park residential development, and that can be discussed or will be discussed in 2021. Explore the feasibility of expanding daycare services. This was identified as a medium-term objective, 2021 to 2022. Again, this is one where we're ahead of the curve, if you want to call it that, whereby council received a preliminary report in late 2020 and directed that a survey be conducted. Staff are in the process or finalizing, I guess, a survey, and that survey will be going out very shortly. And the findings of that survey will be brought to council in 2021. Explore the feasibility of relocating the library to a location the township is not required to pay rent. Again, 2021 to 2022 initiative. Staff will be undertaking, and in fact, we've reached out to start some discussions with the county regarding the interest and feasibility of relocating the Blythe Library. And we'll be reporting back to council as to our discussions with the county on that action item. Develop a recreation master plan. Council has retained a consultant to undertake that, and that will be undertaken in 2021. Review approach to customer service. This is one that was identified as part of the service delivery review. It's been identified as a 2021 to 2022 project. The town hall front office restructuring, as council is aware, has occurred, and staff are currently working on development of a customer service policy and complaints policy, and we'll be bringing those to council for council's consideration in the very near future. As part of the service delivery review, it was suggested that council determine their role in campgrounds. couple things associated with, I guess. This is a 2021 to 2022 project. Review the campground operations has or was included in the RFP, so it is going to be a topic of conversation as we go through and work through the recreation and cultural master plan. We will be or are intending to present an initial report. There's been a lot of conversations in the Blythe area, in the Blythe community, in terms of with the COVID, in terms of is there an opportunity or for to repurpose, reutilize the campgrounds? Is there an opportunity there, I guess, that we're missing? Would be perhaps be a way to phrase it. The broader, the bigger question from a staff's perspective is just in terms of council's role in campgrounds. And I know there's some differing opinions around that. So the thinking from a staff's perspective is we'll bring a report forward to council to have some at least some preliminary conversations as far as we'd like to get an indication, I guess, where council would like to see and go with that. Harmonized police services was identified as part of the service delivery review. We, as you're aware, currently have a contract with the OPP for policing and perhaps for the public in terms of the Blythe is under section, I believe, 5.1 of the Police Services Act, and we have contract arrangements with the OPP for the Wingham. So we have OPP police services for the entire municipality, but under different provisions of the Police Services Act. So the idea or the thought here is to standardize the police service arrangements across the entire township. And bearing in mind, or in addition, well, I guess it's important for council to know that the province is looking at making some changes to the policing legislation. So from a staff perspective, we're monitoring what the province is considering, what the province is contemplating in terms of the act, and that'll all have to be considered as we give some consideration in terms of our policing services. Essentially, kind of 2022, our OPP contract is in terms of till 2022. So we're going to have to start some conversations with you folks, whether towards the end of this year, early next year, in terms of where we're going or what we'd like to do around that. The final category, and I apologize, I'm rambling, I realize here, and I appreciate your patience and that, but I think just as far as, it's a good check-in again on the strategic plan, and it is a good, as you deliberate and discuss your 2021 budget, to keep these things in your mind and in the forefront in terms of your 2021 and your 2022. Review the township's involvement in the tree planting program. Staff will be presenting a report in 2021 for your consideration. Explore educational opportunities for waste reduction and diversions. This is an ongoing one. A new waste recycling program will take effect in May of 2021. New waste bylaw will be presented to council in early 2021. Explore the feasibility of adding more electric vehicle charging stations in the township on a cost recovery basis. Funding resources are being investigated, as well as ideal locations for those charging stations in the township. And there will be a report to council on the financial impacts, and we're aiming for mid of 2021 on that. And in terms of strengthening the township's procurement policy, the procurement policy was updated in 2018. That update did include provisions for environmentally sound acquisitions. And in light of this particular action item, we are going to need to have more conversations with council in terms of the level of energy efficiencies that council wishes to achieve versus the cost. So there's a bit of a balancing act, I guess, there in terms of achieving energy efficiencies, but I guess, or the conversation, I guess, is in terms of at what cost? What are we prepared to, how much additional are we prepared to pay to achieve those energy efficiencies? Implement energy conservation efforts to reduce the carbon footprint of all township facility. Sorry, 20. This has been identified as a long-term project, so I won't comment further any on that. And it's for the possibility of a township environmental advisory committee. Again, it's been identified as a longer term, a 2022 to 23 project. And finally, in terms of, I think it's important for council as well, in terms of, in addition to what is currently happening through the strategic plan and in terms of what we're currently working on through the service delivery review, staff are also working on a number of projects, initiatives that council has asked us to work on. So just, and again, not to dwell on them, but the house and dam, for example, is one where we're working on that one. Staff, we're working on a new payroll system. We're also looking and working on updating our health and safety program. Security of facilities, we have had some, I'll call them scares. And so we are looking to, or have been doing investigating in terms of ramping up our security on our facilities. We do have to give some thought and consideration, and we're currently doing some research and background in terms of our council meetings. Right now, our council meetings are held virtually. But when we get to the point that we can have in-person council meetings, we have been using the Wingham Town Hall Theater. You know, my understanding is that's identified more of a temporary situation. And if that is the case, then we need to look at a permanent location. So staff certainly have some suggestions and ideas for council to think about, but we'll be bringing those forward. Procedure bylaw and BAA constitutions. The BAAs, both the Wingham and the Blythe, their procedure bylaws and the constitutions do require updating. So staff will be working with those two associations to undertake that work. In 2021, I think it's important to bear in mind that 2022 is election year. And as much as that might seem like far away, it's really not far away. From a staffing perspective, we have to start planning in 2021 for that election in 2022. And there may be some decisions that we may need from council to help us and to give us some direction in terms of moving that forward. Human resources is one that we've been talking about, and you'll likely see a report in the very near future around that one. There's also been some conversation for some additional technology for building services, and that is coming out of the service delivery review. Going back to my earlier comment in terms of development of a community engagement and communication strategy, the service delivery review identified or suggested the integration of some corporate communications. So that's something perhaps if the communication strategy is identified as a priority in 2021, then we would roll that into that. But if council was to decide it's going to be a 2022 initiative, then we would consider that as part of that 22 project. The service delivery review also identified some consolidation of right now in terms of our parks. Our parks is kind of operating through two departments, being the Department of Recreation Community Services, Department of Public Works, and Jamie, Vicky, and I have been having some conversations, and we're working out and trying to sort through kind of what the best situation arrangement would be, bearing in mind in terms of being efficient and effective in the delivery of our parks maintenance service. So, so that's a conversation that is currently taking place. And as well, just in terms of, and again through the service delivery review, the township's role in economic development. You know, in terms of what role does council want to have in economic development. And there's certainly been some conversations at the Economic Development Committee, and I believe in terms of at your council table as far as economic development, in terms of, do you want to look at an economic development officer, full-time, part-time? Do you want to hire a consultant? Do you want it project-based? And, what focus do you want? What do you want this person doing? Do you want them to do tourism, marketing, and communication? Do you want them out actively going to places like Toronto, Kitchener, and London, recruiting, I'll call it, businesses, attracting new business to the municipality? And as you can appreciate, in terms of if that was the role that council wanted to have, there would certainly need to be a budget adjustment, because that individual, for example, if it is a staff person, would need hotel accommodation, meals, and travel allowance. Anyways, there's a conversation that we'll have or need to have. I would suggest sooner rather than later, and just in terms of what we envision and what we want economic development to look like from a North Huron perspective. So sorry, and I hope I didn't go through fast, and I apologize for the time frame. But I do feel that it is important, in particular, given the fact that you're halfway through your term of council, and you are working on your 2021 budget, and essentially you have one more budget after this year, and then you'll be into an election. So I think it's beneficial for just to check in with council regarding your priorities, and also to make you aware in terms of what staff is currently working on. And from a staff perspective, we use the strategic plan as our work plan. So we base our work around what you've put into your strategic plan. So are there any questions?
Go ahead, Chris. You're muted, Chris.
Thank you, Reeve. Yeah, through you, Reeve, to Dwayne, and for everybody. I was concerned about 5.5. That would be the Wingham Trailer Park and the housing, suitable housing. It only centers on affordable housing, and we haven't really discussed that. Should it not read several housing initiatives? Because that thing has to be wide open. As far as its destined use, it should be. We should have a discussion about it. What kind of housing goes in?
Thank you. Go ahead, Dwayne. Sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, no, it's a valid point, and just as far as in terms of affordable housing, in terms of looking at our current projects, in terms of that we have on the books, for example, in terms of Hutton Height and the trailer park, the trailer park property is more conducive, if you want to call it that, to the affordability aspect, simply because of the walkability aspect, in terms of you could live at the trailer park and walk downtown to get your groceries and that sort of stuff. So there's that aspect to it, but it's a valid point. And I agree in terms of, that I can make that change to that. Basically, that affordable housing, we'll consider it as we move forward with all of our housing initiatives.
Thank you. Just to add to that, and just to clarify, and then I'll go over to Deputy Reeve's site. I believe if we sell that land to a developer, he's going to tell us what kind of houses he would like to put on there based on resaleability or saleability right now. So that's kind of up in the air, but I see where Chris is coming from. We kind of pigeonhole that. Sorry, go ahead, Deputy Reeve's site.
Yeah, again, it's zone. The determination of what goes into that area is based on a zoning bylaw. So whatever the zoning bylaw permits is what, particularly if we were the developer, we would want to put what we would potentially want there. Obviously, if it's sold to a developer, the developer is going to want to put something that he or she wants to make as much money off of as they can. That's the business that they're in. And by doing that, they can have an affordable place to have to do their business, but also meet the needs of the municipality. I think obviously that discussions with any developer on the sale of property I'm sure is the conversation that staff are having. That's to say, here's the need, here's your need, here's your want. Is there somewhere where we can meet in the middle as it relates to how this is all going to work out? So, I think we look at that strategic plan as everything, regardless of whether it says affordability or affordable housing. I think those discussions are being had based on the needs and the wants of both not only this council but the municipality as a whole. Residents, what are they looking at? They don't want a big hotel in their backyard if they don't want to. So at the end of the day, these discussions are going to continue to be ongoing, and I think as long as those discussions are open and transparent, I think everybody will be happy.
Thank you. Any other questions? And please speak up because I don't have everybody's video up. Okay, not seeing any. I believe I have a mover and seconder, Carson.
Yep, that's correct. And so the motion on the floor is that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives the report of the CAO dated January 22nd, 2021 regarding a status update on the Township's 2020 to 2023 strategic plan for information purposes. So that'll be a recorded vote. So Councillor Heffer. Councillor Heffer, you're muted. Councillor Van Hitterson. Councillor Palmer.
Yes.
Councillor McBurney.
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sipe.
Yes.
Councillor Falconer.
Yes.
And Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. The next is 4.2, PO 2021-02 Capital Roads Projects for 2021. Funds to be placed into reserves for the future capital work projects. Could I get a mover to this? I have Paul moving and I have Christopher seconding. And we're going to let Jamie, I believe, speak to this now. Morning, Jamie.
Hi, good morning. So during the initial budget meeting, questions were asked regarding road works or mentioned within that budget for 2021. So I've provided some additional information in this report and in the photos attached to the report. So there are two types of capital projects that are being proposed on township roadways in 2021. The projects are resurfacing of asphalt, which is a process by which an additional lift of asphalt is applied to existing asphalt. And this method is used in areas where milling or recycling are not a compatible activity with existing asphalt structure. So a few of our roadways only have one lift of asphalt placed upon them. Therefore, if we were to try to mill off the amount required, it would actually start digging into the subgrade. And then the second type of project is seal coating, which involves the application of a special mixture to the road that protects the road base from additional wear and tear. When applied over existing pavement, seal coating is a cost-effective way of resurfacing and extends the life of the road by sealing out moisture. During the budget process, staff reviewed the 2016 asset management plan, the roads need study, and the master servicing plan documents. These documents provided in-depth information on condition of the township's roads and services and were considered during physical inspections of these assets. Currently, staff are recommending that for the 2021 budget year, council authorize 4 capital projects as outlined in Table 1 below, and move any additional funding to reserves for larger capital projects in the future. 3 of the 4 road projects were selected based on the condition of the assets. These 3 roads are becoming problematic, and photos of these segments are attached to the report. Because of significant alligator map and transverse cracking, potholes and road cuts, these road segments require higher levels of service and maintenance. So the guys need to go back out there every so often to make sure that the holes are patched and that they're trying to mitigate the rideability of the roadways. The infrastructure beneath these roads are is in good condition, and maintaining road services assistance prolonging the requirement for more invasive construction activities in the future. If the roads are left to further deteriorate, additional work on the subsurface granular base layers will be required sooner than needed. In the 2016 roads need study, the roads outlined below were recommended for rehabilitation. So Wellington Street was recommended for rehab work in 2018. Owen Street and Jordan were both recommended for 2022. They are a year earlier than what they're suggested, but it's fairly close to what was provided to us in 2016 in the roads need study. This way, we're still able to complete some road work within the township, but also knowing that any additional funding grants would be placed into the reserves for a larger project, since a full reconstruction project like Carling Terrace would be significant funds required for the municipality. The Sealer Coat the other project would be Moncrief Road from Curie Line to Scott Line in East Wawanosh, and this would be the Sealer Coat that I mentioned earlier. The financial impact is shown on Table 2, and it breaks out all of the different roads and their cost allocations. These roads would be used through OCIF funds and as well as gas tax. Yeah, that's pretty much all my report. Do you guys have any questions for me?
Hey, any questions from council? Go ahead, Councillor Falconer.
Thank you. Through you, Reeve. Yeah, I was just curious. This is just kind of a snippet of what roads, and as you mentioned, the one here on Wellington Street was allocated for replacement in the quite early 2018. I just wonder if do we have a rundown of the roads and when they're proposed to be rehabbed, other than, is there anything between 2018 and 2022 that is allocated on our charts that needed to be replaced before, or is this the earliest road in the infrastructure that needed to be replaced? I just wonder if there was any other.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's okay.
Based off of the charts provided from the roads need study, this was one of the earliest. This was one of the ones that had been not completed and therefore presented to council.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Jamie. Deputy Reeve Site.
Yes, thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Reeve. Jamie, when I look at Wellington Road, though, water installation 1995 and wastewater 2001 is when those were installed. So based on the recommendation, this resurfacing would take us to a point where those water and wastewater repairs would need to be then done, and therefore I guess we're not digging up a good road is basically what I'm asking.
Yeah, that's correct. So I actually made a mistake, and the wastewater was installed in 1981, not 2001. So both of those utilities are 30 to 95. No. So I guess the wastewater is more around the 40-year-old mark. With the water, it is not directly under the road. It's off into the boulevard as well in some sections. So we would not be, if there even was a water main break, which we can't predict, we wouldn't be digging up the road. It would be in the grassed boulevard section. But they're both of the utilities are plastic. So it should have a fairly still long life, and we should be able to get quite a few years out of this road before we would need to dig anything up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? And again, if I don't see your hand, it's because your video isn't up, so don't be afraid to pipe up. I'm not seeing any. I have a mover and a seconder, so I'm going to hand it over to the clerk to take the roll call.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the motion on the floor is that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives the report of the Director of Public Works and Facilities dated January 22nd, 2021 regarding capital road projects for 2021 for information, and further that Council approves the 2021 road construction projects as outlined in the Director of Public Works and Facilities report PW 2021-02, and further that Council directs the balance of the OSIF funds to be placed into reserves for future capital works projects. So this will be a recorded vote. So Councillor Van Hittersum?
Yes.
Councillor Palmer?
Yes.
Councillor McBurney?
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sipe? Deputy Reeve Sipe, sorry.
Yes.
Councillor Falconer?
Yes.
Councillor Heffer?
Yes.
And Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
Thank you very much. 4.3, the 2021-02 transfer to reserves that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives the transfer to reserves check from the Director of Finances dated January 22nd, 2021 for information purposes. And further that the Council authorizes the Director of Finance to proceed with the 2020 transfers to reserves as per the attached chart. Do I have a mover? I have Kevin moving. Do I have a seconder? Paul, are you seconding? I'm going to take Mr. Sipes then seconding, I believe. Okay, because I wasn't sure there, Paul. Sorry. You're muted. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Donna to go through this one. Trevor, would you watch the meeting for me for a few minutes, please?
I will do my best with kids floating around as well. I will do my best.
Thank you kindly.
Okay, thank you, Council, and good morning. So I trust you all have your transfers to reserves charts in front of you. Does everyone have their chart? Okay, good. So I'm going to go through this and we'll have some discussion on it as we move through. So at this time of year, this isn't our complete listing of reserves. We're madly working on trying to get year end put to date. And so at this point, this is some reserves that we'd like to get transferred to reserve because some of these items are included in the 2021 budget. So we need to make sure that they're transferred over to proceed with the budget. So the first item is the $100,000 for the accessibility grant out front at the town hall. That was never intended to be a 2020 project. It's just that when the approval was given, they also passed on the $100,000 in funds immediately as well. So that had nothing to do with 2020, and we need to put it into reserves for the 2021 when the project's going to take place. For animal control, we realized additional revenue there, $13,995. As you know, we participated in a dog counting exercise, and that worked out to be very beneficial. So we want to move that money forward. For the next two items relating to the landfill, basically we had bag tags, an increase in revenue of $19,000 and tipping fees of $48,000. So as you know, out at the landfill, we owe money on that compacting machine that we financed from ourselves. So Jamie and I are going to have a discussion whether we put this money towards the internal debt that we owe or whether we need to put some of it towards closing costs. So we've been trying to get a report ready on the landfill at some point, and we're sure hoping 2021 is the year for that. For the daycare, we're working on balancing up the year end there for the county. And so the county was very generous in December and forwarded us quite a bit of money. So at this point, Trish and I are recommending that $70,000 be put forward into a reserve till we balanced up from 2020, and then of course we have no idea what's going to happen in 2021. So this would help us if anything happened throughout the year. We would have these funds available for the daycare, depending on what could happen. If at the moment the daycare is open, I think the plan is to keep it open, but as I said, we'll have to continue through the year and see how things are affected by COVID. So that's additional revenue that we had received. And so moving on to additional expenses, as you know, both for council and administration, we didn't go actually away to attend conferences and such, but members of council did attend some virtual meetings, AMO and such, and I think that's what's going to happen this year. And the same with staff. We have still been participating in a lot of online courses, and I think that will really ramp up in 2021 because we need to get caught up from not participating as much in 2020. In the 2020 budget, we had the approval for a half-time or contract HR position, and we didn't fill that position. Dwayne was able to make some temporary arrangements, but we would still have $54,000 to carry forward, and that's included in the 2021 budget in order to pursue that once again, as Dwayne outlined in the strategic plan. We also, in our budget each year, sometimes we win, sometimes we lose. We budget for our insurance deductible. As you know, on some portions of our insurance, our deductible's up to $25,000, and some spots, some pieces of our insurance, it's $10,000. So it doesn't take only one item that we end up having to pay that amount. And so we try to, as if we don't use it, we're trying to build up an insurance deductible reserve in case we ever get hit with a couple of items in a particular year. The next one, the building condition assessment, is actually not so much a transfer to reserves, but it will mean less transferring out of reserves. So council had agreed to fund the building condition assessment project from the modernization reserve, and it was $50,000, and we've only spent $21,100. We hope to continue with that project in the future, and so we want to make sure that that money stays in the reserve under that allocation to continue with this worthwhile project for sure. Also in 2020, I always budget for some asset management money. As you know, we're madly working towards meeting the July regulation. And so I've put in this $2,500 left over from 2020. We'll definitely need to use at some point in 2021. Accessibility project, which was the renovations out front. And it was in line with the COVID renovation. So again, we had, council had given permission that we were able to take $50,000 out of the modernization fund, but we only spent the $26,000 we want to be able to put back into reserve so that we have it as we continue to work towards accessibility. For the CBO, Kirk's on the line, but we'll have to, we gave round one to this, but the legislation says if you have a surplus in the building department, you're to put that away in a dedicated building reserve under the legislation. So we still have some further adjustments to make, but this amount will be the preliminary amount that we can transfer to reserve. And then I'm expecting in another report to be able to bring even more to go into the building reserve. So under airport is next, and the airport operations were underspent in 2020. So I know the airport is a hot topic for council, and so I wanted to get $18,000 that was underspent put into a reserve for you so that you're going to run into needing money to help you make decisions out there, whether it's planning or surveying and all that type of thing. So this will help a little bit to help you further that initiative to deal with the airport. The Blythe Hullet landfill, that is administered by Central Huron, and we don't know from year to year how much we're going to spend, but if there is anything left. Sorry, Trevor, are you bringing up a topic? Oh, sorry.
No. I've got children that are needing stuff, so sorry. If you see my hand, unless I yell, I don't need anything.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. Okay, so the Blythe Hullet landfill, as you know, landfills cost a lot of money and their closures are going to cost a lot of money. So staff takes every opportunity to tuck away whatever dollars we possibly can into the future needs of landfills. So in 2020, we didn't have to pay as much as what we budgeted, so we want to transfer that 12.9 over into a landfill reserve for post-closure. Community partnership, again, the way with COVID went last year, we didn't receive our applications, a lot of the functions and such that our community friends who help us maintain some beautification efforts and different functions around the municipality didn't take place. So I wanted to make sure I get that money put away in 2020, because who knows, things open up later on in 2021. You may have a few more requests coming in, and so it will give you the opportunity to support the community. I mean, it's not much, but if that happens, you'll have a few dollars put away for that. One of the projects in Blythe this year was the sidewalk Blythe parking project, and so we had $9,708 left for unspent in that project. So I want to make sure that we get that put into reserves. And Jamie, I hate to put you on the spot. Is there more work to do there, or is that project totally completed? I'm sorry, I wasn't remembering the answer to that.
No, there's probably more sidewalks to be completed, but for 2021, that wasn't an initiative that Public Works was going to take on.
Okay, thank you. So then, but we still wanted to have the money set aside so that when in 2022, if we are going to do some more work on that, we will have a little bit of money set aside for that as well. So one of the next things is the fleet purchase, and down below you'll see more information on fleet. Jamie had ordered 2 pieces of equipment and we thought they were going to arrive, but they did not. So we had the money in 2020 budget. So it's just moving it forward because we don't expect delivery until 2021. And then she is slightly underspent there. That she had $13,717 left. So we want to make sure that money stays in reserves. The next item is also basically less money coming out of reserves. For many years, the staff have been trying to combat the humidity, condensation, infiltration issues down at the complex. And so they expected it in the budget, they had expected it to be about $88,000. But they were able to actually complete the repairs for about 25. So the $63,000 will not come out of reserves or go back into reserves to ensure that it's there to be used for some of the future projects at the complex that are going ahead. So in the next list, then, projects related to COVID. As you know, over at the Armories building, we were to take that electrical panel off of the side of the building, and so that wasn't done, and it's been moved forward to 2021, and that was 26.5. There was some bridge and culvert work that wasn't completed, and so those funds are moved forward to 2021 as well and included in the budget. Dwayne talked to you about the CIP program not being utilized in 2020, so it's moved forward to 2021. I think you've heard a report already on the Alice Munro Festival that those funds weren't required in 2020, so they've been moved forward to the 2021 budget. And also in 2020, we had budgeted for our share of a RED grant, and that also hadn't taken place. There was significant work done on Hutton Heights in 2020, but we had a budget of $120,000, and so not everything got completed, but we have shown the Hutton Heights project continuing in 2021. As Dwayne outlined, the website project has been working all year long, and it's very nearing completion, but there will still be some funds to pay in 2021 for sure. Jamie was working on electrical upgrades at the Wingham Public Works, and so there's going to be about $2,866 left there. A project we didn't get started last year was Town Hall exterior repairs. I don't know if you've noticed, but a lot of the window sills and things like that around the Town Hall are deteriorating, and so the whole sill actually needs replaced in certain spots, and spots are desperately in need of painting. So we hope that to actually be able to carry this work out in 2021. As well, Dwayne mentioned in the strategic plan, council will be discussing sort of a more permanent location, or are they satisfied with the town hall theater location, or moving back downstairs, or I guess there's a number of options, but there was no point in replacing the carpet and purchasing chairs. The chairs are pretty well on their last legs until we know where the new location is going to be, and then you can fit some of the size things to what the new location will stand. The next one is there was supposed to be a sidewalk project on Josephine Street, and that wasn't completed. I believe that's in conjunction with some studies being done. So until that information comes back, there's not much point in completing the sidewalk portion. Sorry,
Donna, that one is that's the portion of sidewalk that's going down to Highway 86 and 4. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, but Jamie, can you confirm that, please?
Yes, that's correct.
And when you say, and when I read that is included in the, I'm assuming, is that included in the 22 preliminary budget, or is that actually supposed to say 2021?
No, Jamie was saying to me that we don't think that we're going to have the information back for 2021. So it would be a 2022 project.
That's fine. I'm glad to see stuff that says 2022 as well. I like the planning.
Good. Okay, and then I mentioned that the trucks that Jamie ordered are again, due to COVID, are way on back order. We're not sure when we're going to get those trucks now, even though they've been on order for months and months. So we had to move that money forward. And the same with the at the Public Works building. You did the roof, and then Jamie had brought you forward a report to do some electrical, but then we haven't been able to get the electrical completed. So that still needs done. So we had to move that money forward. And then lastly is Stone Orchard is our cemetery software. And as you know, we've been undertaking projects to get the cemetery records updated. And so we weren't just sure if we're going to have to hire some help. It's so close to being completed, but or whether we can free up some time for existing staff to be able to get that done. But either way, we'll have a little bit of money put away to finish that project up. So that is the first round list of reserves. And as I said, we don't have the year-to-date actuals completed as yet. Our cutoff date for 2020 is Monday, January the 25th. And then we will be working on from there on till the audit's completed. Then we work on all our 2020 actuals. But I want to make sure that, well, we'll talk about the actuals as we move forward as part of the budget. Does anyone have any questions here on this initial listing of 2020 transfers to reserves?
Go ahead, Anita.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay,
Anita.
Donna, thank you. Why is there twice the fleet purchase in there? Once in the the second time in the second column. Why isn't that in the same one? Because it's not completed, or why is that? Like there's 13,000 in expensive?
Yes. So the $13,000 is going to be leftover money out of the original budget. So that will be put back into reserves for a future fleet purchase that we don't like. There's so much fleet to buy in the next while. It will just go into a general fleet reserve. But then the large amount is to cover the 2 trucks that we've ordered that actually won't come in, and we won't see the expense then till 2021.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other questions on that? Okay, thanks, Anita.
I'm not seeing anyone, Don. Is there anyone else out there that would like to touch on any of the budget? Okay, we're not seeing anyone. So we have a mover and a seconder for the transfer to reserve. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Carson. Sorry, Paul, did you have your hand up?
No, just pushing my button.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the motion on the floor is that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives the transfer to reserves chart from the Director of Finance dated January 22nd, 2021 for information purposes, and further that Council authorizes the Director of Finance to proceed with the 2020 transfers to reserves as per the attached chart. So Councillor Palmer?
Yeah, yes.
Councillor McBurney?
Yes.
Deputy Reeve-Sipe?
Yes.
Councillor Falconer?
Yes.
Councillor Heffer?
Yes.
Councillor Van Hittersum?
Yes.
And Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
Thank you very
Okay.
kind.
Thank you, Carson. So then, before we move on, may I ask, would anyone like a 5-minute break, or is everyone ready to, okay to continue on till lunchtime? Our plan is to be done by noon, if at all possible. So does anyone need a break, or are you okay?
Need a break.
Okay, let's take a 5-minute break, then we'll reconvene at, where's the time on here?
10:30.
So, yeah, so let's make it 10:35 or 10:36.
Okay,
Now, I'll take a stretch too.
Yep. So Dwayne, just make sure you don't pause the recording or it will cut out the video.
I was just going to comment to be mindful the recording is on.
Okay, Carson, so we should just be another minute or two. We're just waiting for a couple to come back.
Yep, once Reeve Bailey's back, you'll have all of council.
Okay, thank you.
Guys, we all ready to go?
Yep, we're good.
Okay, let's start it up. Go ahead, Donna. So this is draft budget version 2.
Okay, so thank you, Reeve Bailey. So everyone had their new copy of draft version number 2. And I just want to take you back a second. So on December the 10th, when we presented the budget, we were looking at an overall spending increase of $184.41. And that worked out to be about 2.99%. At that budget meeting, council requested that this second version include 3 new items, and that was $50,000 for an economic development officer, and there was discussion whether that would actually be hiring someone or being put into reserves for another date. And the $100,000 for an additional $100,000 for asset management reserves or the house and dam. That was discussed like one of the other or a combination of that. And then there was discussion about the remediation for the former Blythe Public Works and former Blythe Fire Hall buildings. And so that cost, in total, those 3 items cost about $235,000. So we came from the $184,000. And we'll talk in a minute about staff did a few more adjustments. And then with the addition of this $235,000, that gets us up to where we are now in this budget at a total increase of spending at $398,044 or 6.48%. So just before we go too far down the road of discussing this, I would like you to flip to the second page there in that presentation, and that was called Council Information. So I want to backtrack for just a second. As part of the budget process, Council requested some past history for full-time equivalents for staffing numbers. And so we went back for 5 years and compiled this chart. Julie prepared this information, and she's working on finalizing 2020. And then the plan is to keep this updated from now on, so council will have it as a reference. So
excuse me, Donna.
Yes.
Donna, sorry about that. I can't find this, what you're talking about.
Did you want me to share my screen of the presentation?
Please, if you would, Carson, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So here's the chart that I'm speaking of. And so in this chart, as you know, we have such a wide number of part-time staff. And sometimes like that could be, 100, 150, depending on what's going on. Certainly not during COVID last year, but some of the staff may only work, 10 or 15 hours during a day camp program or something. So you can't really count that as one staff. So what we do, the normal working hours for a year is 1,950 hours. So we took the total number of hours worked in each of those years by part-time staff, divided by 1,950, and then it turned that into a full-time equivalent. So that's what that part-time staff means there. And then full-time, of course, is all the rest of our full-time staff. we extrapolated out police, water, sewer, and fire because those numbers have varied over the years due to the police going and the water department going to Veolia, and then when we had our full-time fire person at the EST. So for 2020, as I said, Julie's working on that, and with COVID, it's going to be quite a chore, but we had the dollars, and as I said, because there was so many staff laid off in 2020, and we didn't hire the part-time staff, it's going to look very skewed to what a normal year is. But anyway, on a go forward basis, we were hoping that this chart is what you were looking for, and we'll complete 2020, and then on a go forward, keep this chart updated for council and future council to have as a reference. So it was Councillor Sipe, I think, that had requested the information in the beginning. And so I just wanted to quickly ask Councillor Sipe, was this the information you were looking for, Trevor, or as a reference, or was there something else that you were thinking of?
Thank you, Donna. Through you, Reeve. No, this is exactly what I was expecting. This is exactly the information that I would expect the public to see. The reason why I say that is there is always the indication or the belief that the municipality is just continually hiring people to do jobs that we don't need them to do. What this is telling me is, from a full-time equivalent perspective, we've actually stayed relatively consistent over the past 6 years. And I don't know about everybody else in the room, but government regulations and government requests hasn't gone down. If at all, it has gone up. So our existing staff complement is just doing more. And ultimately, yes, our existing staff complement have wage grades adjustments and a whole bunch of other things that are, but from a full-time equivalent perspective, the municipality is just not hiring more individuals to communicate what they need to do. This is really a discussion about how we can be consistent, but this information would also be nice to understand is comparative to somewhat of a similar size municipality, if we could have it, so that, the argument is, do we have too many staff? My argument would be nobody can answer that question. I would argue that if anybody can answer the question, it's the staff who are considered to be full-time equivalent, because I would argue that every person that's working for the municipality is probably doing more work than there is required to be done on a daily basis. And therefore, you know what? It is part of the budget that we need to continue, and we're not going to have a chance, but we're not growing. And I would argue that if we're not going to continue to, as residential growth continues, we're going to have to look at what our staff complement is on some of these projects. But that's the part that I wanted to make sure that was communicated to the rest of council so that everybody could understand the information that was here. So thank you, Donna. That's exactly what I was looking at.
Okay, thank you very much. Was there any other comments from council then before we move back into the version 2 of the budget then? I'm not hearing any or seeing any, so we'll continue back to the discussions. So as I was saying, in the first round of the budget, council had requested that we add 3 particular items. And so I just wanted to go over those. I mentioned them briefly there. So if we wanted to discuss them in one by one in order, and then we can have a discussion on what that does to the taxes. So as we were saying,
Donna, just if you don't mind, sorry.
Yes.
Carson, can you I don't think we need the screen up that's right now, and I can't see anybody putting their hands up. Could you take that screen down if it's not needed? If it is, leave it up.
So Reeve Bailey, I believe that's where Donna's at in her presentation, this slide. So she's going through a summary of all those changes, and this is basically a summary of all those changes.
Thank you. Donna, the other thing I wanted to mention too, and to the council is one thing, the 6.48%, that's spending increase or tax increase?
That is our spending increase in additional dollars spent over last year.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to point out to council too is we have a few things, couple of things. One is the police station we have in there, and forgive me, I forget the numbers, 50 or 100,000, whatever it was. That is not a project that needed to happen next year if we run into a situation where we find ourselves with too many projects on the go. That could wait for down the line, because that's obviously just going to change and turn into parking when that's done. So the expense on that could be changed. The other thing is, too, is when it comes to the fire department, Marty, did you get answers back from any of the municipalities whether they're going to they're willing to help us pay for the fire truck, the new fire truck you want to purchase? Are you on there?
Yes. So I've got an answer back from all three of our partners. I attended both Central Huron and Morris Turnberry Council meetings online, and I have the approval letter from Morris Turnberry. I have a approval email basically from ACW, and I'm just waiting for the Central Huron letter, but all have approved it through their councils.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to point one thing out again, as if there's not something that's bothering me. About a year ago, we got a gentleman's agreement that one of our partners would continue to pay the amount they owe for or donated or owe, put it any way you want, for the soft services that they were using. It was a gentleman's agreement. They didn't pay. We are responsible for the tax dollars of North Huron. As we move forward, we need to make sure that any commitments that are being made are going to be kept, which makes it very difficult for me because there was a very large commitment that was made that was not kept. I'm not going to get into it right now, but as you can tell by the tone of my voice, when somebody lies to me, I'm not a happy camper. There's many circumstances that could be explained and figured out what went wrong or what's going on. But when I'm told on a gentleman's agreement that things would continue, and then a year later, after you've used the services for the whole year, you refuse to pay for it, we got to be careful, because I am responsible for the North Huron taxpayer. I cannot afford to give anything away any more than the Ford dealership can give cars away or the restaurants can give food away. We can't afford to do it any longer. I just want to put that out there, and we'll move forward now. Thank you, Donna. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So just to go through these changes then, so our spending increase in budget number one was $184,041. When staff went back to have one more look through, we were actually able to reduce by $20,957 through various, there was a couple $1,000s here or there. So our new starting point is actually $163,084 in spending. So then that, from our new starting point, then I added in the $50,000 for the economic development officer, and Dwayne did the research on what it would take to start the remediation for the public works public work buildings down in Blythe, and he had found that would be about $85,000. And then Deputy Reeves Sipe had brought up about adding $100,000 for asset management, whether it be devoted to the house and dam or to asset management. So when you take all of that into account, everything under the dollar change column, that totals $214,042. And it takes into account, as I said, all of the items we've just discussed. And so then therefore our overall budget spending increase would be $398,084.44. So I guess I'm looking for a bit of direction if you want to look forward how that impacts the taxes, or do you want to have individual discussions on each of these at this point before we move forward?
So if you just want to speak up, because again, I can't see everyone on the screen right now.
There's Kevin here, through you, Reeve, if I could. Just for my own kind of realization of the difference between what the COVID has done to us this year, as far as looking over the overall budget, and the last two slides that we had, that some of the wages were down almost $1 million between the 2019 and 2020. I'm just wondering, is that actual savings? Like, was that left over from last year's budget? I was just wondering if is there a surplus from last year's budget, and what gets done with it in accordance to these changes? Like,
Yes, so you've approved this list of transfers to reserves, and there will be a few more transfers to reserves as we balance forward, but I'm still anticipating a surplus once we get that all done. And historically, what we do with that is to transfer it into our tax stabilization reserve, is historically what is done with that. But what we'll need to do this year, because of the way COVID turned out, is we'd want to have a discussion on that, whether, there's something else that we needed to do with that, but it would end up in a reserve. Now, you pointed out the reduction in wages, which is correct, but the offset part of that, which figures into it, is the big reduction in revenue that we didn't get either. So, yes, we saved a lot of money on wages, but we lost a significant amounts of money in revenue. And so then, as I put the year end together, I need to look at both sides of that equation to be able to determine, how much money we're going to have left. Does that make sense?
Yes, that does. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Go ahead, Deputy Reeve Sight.
Reeve Bailey, I'm wondering. I have the three things that we have added, and I'll just make comment on all three, and then we can have some more discussion. Is the $50,000 economic development officer? To be quite honest, I would like to push that. And the reason I would like to push that is only because 2021 is going to be a similar year than 2020. We're not going to see significant changes in that I can see, unless somebody can see that crystal ball a little better than me. But I don't see us having a vaccine to the general public before, September or October of 2021. So the mass of going out and trying to bring jobs and everything into the municipality, my suggestion is that we're doing a significant amount of work today to build up infrastructure in housing and all that type of stuff. And I use the analogy, if you build it, they will come. My argument is that once we have it built, then we have the infrastructure to say, if you want to come in, your shop or your manufacturing facility, or now we have houses in order to give it. We can't support bringing more economic development into the municipality because we can't house them right now. We're having a hard time, as Reeve Bailey's mentioned, much more is the labor shortage that we have because of housing in this municipality. So my concern is that is one thing that we potentially could pass on in this 2020 budget. The other one is the public works buildings assessment. Those ones in Blythe, arguably, we don't have a game plan as to what we're going to use those for, that land, whether it be for parking, whether it be whatever. So to spend 85,000 on not what we know what we're going to utilize it for, I would rather us have a discussion in 2021 as to what the end game is for that location, and then determine how this public works assessment is going to be determined in 2022 to support that type of stuff, that type of investment. And in the increase in the reserves and the asset management, if we need to get it, I think, and I was the one that put this on the table, and that's why I'm saying this. The 100,000, I would prefer to leave it alone. And the reason why I say that is because our asset reserves, our asset management's not going away. And we can defend the argument that we have a deficit in our asset management, and that whether it's for the house and dam or whatever asset we have, town hall, the rec department, the rec arena, Blythe Community Center, we have $1 billion in assets that we need to replace. I think, and ultimately, that adding that is not a bad thing to do in the long-term goal of this municipality.
Thank you, Trevor. Go ahead, Chris, and then Anita.
Yeah, thank you, Reeve. I'm that 100,000 for asset management. Okay, if it goes into just the asset management per se, that's one thing. But when you mention the house and dam, you are perking the ears of hundreds of people as to what do you mean? Like, even I don't know what you mean. Is it for tearing it out? Or is it going to be dumped into rehab, in which we haven't agreed to do yet? Or HITs haven't agreed. So that one disturbs. The other one is that 50 grand for the EC officer. Like, for me to come on board for that one, I have to see what that person, what is their job, not just a description, but what is it? Like, we don't have any commercial land, and anything residential has nothing to do with them because it gets sold to the developer and then they do that work. So I'm at a loss to see what the heck we need that person for. And, how long do we keep them? Yeah, and perhaps for a year or two. Then what? You fire them? Like, is it like, what is it? Like, it's so unknown to me that I will not accept it. I just don't. That's my bottom line on that one. And then when you mention the dam one, that one is bothering me. You already heard that. I'm really nervous about a 6% increase in spending. I was really, really hoping for that this council can have at least 1 year in its term where we have a relatively neutral budget. I think we owe that to the people. And this could be a year that we do that.
Thank you, Christopher. I'm going to hand it over to Anita and then to Deputy Reeve Sykes.
Yes, thank you, Reeve Bailey. I totally agree with Deputy Reeve Sykes and Chris Palmer. I think this is a very, very hard year for plenty of people. I even would like to see the reserves, the 100,000 reserves to the asset management gone, or at least lessened. I think it's too hard on the people right now to look at any increases. We can have a look at, Donna is saying, them surplus, to put that surplus into a reserve for asset management. But I really hope that we don't have to increase anything this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Trevor.
Yes. Sorry. So to comment to Councillor Palmer's question. So what my comment is when I say asset management, I say an asset management reserve. In order for that asset management reserve to be used for anything, it needs support from council. So if council wants to move, I'm saying $100,000, and Councillor Van has made a comment about, maybe it's not the right time to do it. And I'm okay with that discussion. What I'm saying is we have an asset management reserve that we need to put away for money. If we want to move, if council sees fit to move money away to the house and dam for dismemberment or demolishment or whatever you want to call it, then this council will have another discussion as it relates to what that money is for. I did not specifically indicate that it was for the house and dam. I'm just saying all assets in the municipality. And if we want to use that asset for anything with regard to the municipality, then council will need to direct staff on how to use it. That's the comment. So it's not to perk up anybody's ears to say that I'm suggesting putting $100,000 into removing the dam. That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking because we have a ton of assets that have deficits that we need to deal with anyways. This way is just, and that's just one of them. So, you know, Councillor Van Heersum's made a good point in the sense that, you know, are these things that we've added, are they needs? Are they a necessary need? And, you know, I'm sure every councillor is going to have a different opinion, but I don't disagree. These are not absolute needs, but ultimately at the end of the day, we are the same people that were elected in the sense that we get the same financial problem that we had when we were elected, is that if you continue to kick the thing down the pipe, another council is going to have to deal with it. And I understand COVID has done a detrimental thing to a number of people. So I am even more heightened as I look at people today, because I've got kids floating around my house, throwing balloons at me and everything else. I understand it. We are not in the same world we were a year and a half ago. So anything that we can do to move it, if we think we can, I just want to make sure that we have a commitment as a council to relook at these things and not just kick them down the pipe to the next council or the 6 councils after us.
Thank you, Trevor. Go ahead, Paul. Paul, you're muted. Paul.
Yes, I agree with what's going on as the discussion. My only question is with that 85,000 for the public works. These are empty buildings that are sitting there. I feel that money invested. I was led to believe that the resale of that property could go towards offsetting of the sand shed, the public works building. And that's why I feel it could be put in, and it's not, it's going to be money coming back in a sense too. That's just my point on that.
Thank you, Paul. Anyone else? I'm going to touch on this a bit. Asset management. First thing that gets kicked down the road is the asset management. The asset management, whether it's fixing a bridge in Morris Turnberry, or sorry, in East Wawanosh. Well, that was a bad one. Whether it's fixing a bridge in East Wawanosh or fixing Memorial Hall in Blythe or doing something with the one of our buildings here in Wingham. Asset management or construction is always the last thing. The first thing to go and the most important thing you need. Trevor is right. If we can possibly hold that, we should. Because if you take that 4 years over, then you can take care of some of your buildings. As far as the buildings in Blythe, Paul is right. It's my understanding that if we were to take this money and spend this and sell those locations, the sooner we sell them, somebody can use them. Somebody may want to use it as a garage. We don't know and buy it as a garage. My understanding, talking with the BIA over in Blythe, is and the BIA president, Mr. Sparling, is that would be a great place for another fourplex or homes, which does what? It brings in tax dollars to North Huron. So if we spend the $85,000 there and take care of that this year, within 2 years, 3 years, because we, as Dwayne has said, people are asking for land, we could have tax dollars coming in forever. As long as that building is standing, you have tax dollars coming in, which we can help use to pay to fix the buildings. The economic development person, let's put a graph together of what that person's duties would do and how they would be. I understand. I totally understand. This is a leap of faith, and I totally understand that most people don't understand economic development. I'm not going to argue that. You know why? Because usually it's 5 or 10 years down the road when the payback comes. At the Economic Development Committee meetings, I have said openly that this is not going to be a girl that's going to dictate it to be or take the dictation to BIAs. This is the world I lived in before I retired. So we're going to have somebody that actually does things. And you'll say, well, there's nothing to do yet. You lay the groundwork now for what's going to happen 3 years down the road. Again, these are the things that will reduce your taxes. This is the growth you need. Dwayne has told you, people are calling already about the some of the land we have for sale. It's there. We just got to move forward on it. But a lot of the things we're doing, we will be off council, and it will be the councils down the road that can say, yes, thank you, we have revenue coming in, and the buildings are in good shape. These are the tough decisions, but I just wanted to point out what that's all about. Having said that, the one last thing I will say is in the world I live in, I don't think there's such a thing as a zero budget increase, because at zero, you put nothing away to fix old buildings, or you should have taken and put 1% on to fix an older building. Somebody down the road has to do that. On the other side of it, no, we can't afford a 6% increase. We are in hard times. Our main streets are in hard times, and we need to support them, and we can support them by doing our due diligence on this budget we're working with. And I will let it go at that for this one. Is there anyone else that would like to speak up and have a conversation about this?
Just a point.
Yes, go ahead, Christopher.
Yeah, just a point.
Yep.
Whenever we make a decision about anything, to think of cost benefit. Like when we hire somebody, say this officer, for instance, we have to think, okay, how many houses, what's the taxation from how many houses would pay? And for 50 grand, that's approximately 30 homes, 20 to 30 homes. So you got to think that each and every year, like year after year after year, because the wages are still being paid. And I'm not just picking on an economic officer, it's anybody we hire. So please, in the future, we have to be business people. This is a business. This is a corporation, and we need to make sure we run it where, we're not going to break even because there's so much service going on, and we all accept that. But when we hire somebody, think of how much it costs to have that person, and how do we get that money back each and every year. Yes, we can say maybe somebody will pay, the payback will be 5 years. Well, that's an awful lot of houses in between those 5 years. So I'm willing to go for things that make sense and that pay. That's only right. But I don't know, I've just thrown it out there that you think about those, anything in those terms.
Thank you, Christopher. Your economic development person will not have anything to do with housing. It's for commercial, keeping your downtowns vibrant, keeping them full, introducing new facilities, factories to our location, taking care of making sure that the people can't come. We did that ourselves on acute labor shortages, but that's politicians and staff that don't do that for a living. But we were very lucky. We reached out for friends, and they did help us, and we're fine. The whole idea behind it is to, as you said, make sure you're going to get your money's worth. It's just not another warm body. Love that attitude, Chris. I love that attitude. Okay, anyone else?
Reeve Bailey.
Yeah, go ahead.
Through you, Reeve. My concern is just to be cautious on our spending. And we do have additional housing now. We just got to wait and reap some of the benefits going forward.
Yeah.
It should be building.
Yeah.
But I agree, we got to watch our spending.
Yep, thank you. Councillor Falconer?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Reeve. I just want to make a comment that we all saw that presentation a year ago of all where it showed a map of all the counties around and where all the new economic development was going on with the regards to the Bruce and a few other projects, and the hole that it showed around everything, where everything was going on except North Huron. And there was a reason for that. It's economic development. The other places around us were pushing harder. they were keeping their ear to the ground, and they were getting the institutions to invest in their municipality. I just wanted to bring that up, that there's still that hole, and there's a reason for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Go ahead, Anita.
Yeah, I was wondering if there's a possibility to have a better contact with the county economic development, because they hire development officers here and there and everywhere, and I think it's important that they look at our wishes, because we pay county taxes as well. So, is there an opportunity there, or?
Yeah, I can speak to that. I can speak to that. So I was in conversation with Jody Codry, I think 3 times last week. What's today? Friday. I was in contact with him about an issue on Wednesday. We work well together. They are there. We just reach out to them. There's no problem there at all. They are on behalf of the entire county. So they're working for everybody. So the same issues we have are in other municipalities too. So it's not strange to them. But no, unless Dwayne wants to speak to that a bit too, we have a very good working relationship. They are at all our meetings. We call upon them. They bring us information. They've helped us with the funding and stuff. So Dwayne, if you have anything to add, Anita, there is a good communication with them.
No, Your Worship, I don't have anything additional to add. So we are working with them. So, for example, we have the rural broadband discussion that is ongoing, and certainly County ECDev is joining us and certainly part of that conversation. So, no, I mean, it's a good working relationship. So in terms of exploring, looking at other opportunities for further development of that is certainly a possibility.
I was just worried that that there will be an overlapping of jobs they have to do, because I understand that this economic development will be only for North Huron, but it's already so done from the county, and why would we hire somebody when we have access to county economic development officers?
So I guess I would answer that with a question. First of all, starting with, as I said, they've been to a lot of meetings. They've helped us out. If you can answer me what they brought forward from the county specifically for North Huron in the 2 years.
It's all an overlap. It's overlapping. I think there's a lot of overlapping, and I think we can ask them to specifically look at North Huron.
I'm fine with that.
But what do we have them to offer? You can ask that too. Like, we don't have any land or buildings or anything that's available for anybody. I think it's also up to the residents to promote our towns and our rural areas.
Yep,
and say what a nice.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. But any time, if any counselor wants information or thinks anything's wrong, just give me a call, and we'll sit down with the ECDev from the county, or Huron Futures, which helps small businesses. And Anita, you're on both actually, and you're aware of what's going on with them too, with Paul and that. So we do work collaboratively, but what I was trying to emphasize is it's a big territory. It's one of the largest counties in Ontario, and there's bigger communities that they're helping because they're more aggressive than North Huron. We're doing the best we can as a council, but we've just got to get this one up and going. I know we've got development now, but I'll never be happy. You'll never hear me say I've got enough. I'm not built that way. I am going to hand this over to Paul now, Mr. Hefford.
Yeah, yes, through you, Reeve. You asked there if anything's happened in the last 2 years with the economic. Well, I did a little bit of work for a gentleman, and he told me how well the economic worked with him. They came and gave him lots of information, and he's planning on doing a big build in Wingham. So I really feel they are there, more than willing to help. That's just my thought.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Palmer.
Yeah, thank you, Reeve. Yeah, I guess to answer the sad whole point, It's because the municipality doesn't own 5 or 10 acres. I wish we did. Like, to make it commercial, like hire a person, but we don't have it. And you look around, Minto's mentioned often. Well, look at the land they've got around Palmerston and Harriston. Like, it's working for them. And I don't know, unless there's something, a rabbit we can pull out of the hat, we're stuck at this point. Unless one want to buy some land in East Wabash somewhere. But are we in the business of purchasing land? And that's another question, another discussion.
Yep. Thank you kindly. And you know the golden rule. You know my life's golden rule. Don't tell me I can't do it. Help me find a way to do it. We can do it. We are the council that can do it. We have to, as Chris just said, we have to come up with the ideas. Okay, I won't delay this any further. Anybody else? Not seeing any. Donna?
Okay, thank you. That was good discussion, Council. So, in order to nail this down, then, so back to the I think your comments where we all need to be very mindful to keep taxes as low as possible, which I think we're totally all in agreement. But at the same time, we need to move things forward. So one of the suggestions that I would make then is that if council was in agreement, we'll discuss these items, but if we pulled the economic development money out of the budget at this moment, wait until we have all our year-end numbers and reserve numbers from 2020, and then if council, we could have a discussion again, and if things opened up at that point, because it might even be difficult today to find someone with the qualifications that you want in this COVID environment. So if we give it a couple of months, see where we've ended up totally for 2020, and then at that time, revisit the discussion. And if we have the money available in reserves and council, the climate is more suitable, etc., then at that time, council could have the discussion and determine whether they wanted to make an amendment to the budget. It wouldn't make any change to taxation because you'd be pulling money out of reserves, and you could have the conversation at once again about either hiring this $50,000 economic position or piecemealing it. Perhaps maybe there's a particular project and you could have a person do a contract for the remainder of the year or something of that nature. So what sort of thoughts do you have on that? Pulling it out for now and revisiting it later in the year when the economic climate has hopefully returned a bit.
So I think that's what I heard too, Donna, but you said in a couple of months, we're going to have our budget done. We're just going to be waiting on the schools in the county, right? Not 2 months from now.
Oh, yes. Oh, no, we would be passing our budget the way, however we end up, hopefully today. But as I said, often throughout the year, things happen and your staff brings you a report and that wasn't in the budget, and then council has the opportunity to consider it at that time, as long as the report can outline how that would be paid for and not affect the budget that you've passed.
So, council, how do you feel about it? Chris?
I don't know. My suggestion would be pull the EC officer, the 85 for the public works building. Like, we need that work done on the on the Blythe Public Works, right? Because that's assessing, doing all that. If we want to move forward with that land, we have to spend that money, perhaps that much money. And how about drop the asset management reserve to 50? So it's basically 50 and 85 as an increase.
Go ahead, Dwayne, sorry.
Sure. So just I'll maybe comment briefly on the Blythe Public Works and the 85,000. So as I explained to the Economic Development Committee yesterday, so that money is intended to undertake a phase 1, phase 2, and possibly a phase 3 environmental site condition assessment. And just in terms of going back to Trevor Sipe's comment, in terms of what that property could be used for, possibilities are, and it's been referred to, residential. Parking lot is another option, and the third option is repurposing it for commercial industrial purposes. So those are kind of the three possible land uses that I'm envisioning. And going back to in terms of what that property is redeveloped for may in part depend on the findings of the environmental assessment. So for example, if we do the phase 1, phase 2, and we find out through phase 2 that we have to do soil remediation and it's very expensive, it might be, for lack of a better word, cost prohibitive for residential purposes, and the less costly, perhaps better use of the property might be simply to make it into a parking lot. So I'm just using that as an example. But the 85,000 is intended to do again phase 1, phase 2, and potentially some phase 3 work. And if, depending on where that goes, I've also built in terms of possible either possible demolition, I guess, of those buildings. But in terms of how far and how much you want to push that property, I mean, if you were to decide, for example, to reduce 85 and lower it, basically, you know, from a staff's perspective, we would do the work to the extent that we could up to the dollar amount that council made available. So just offering that. So if you want to look at reducing the 85, certainly that's a possibility. We'll just work to whatever dollar amount that council establishes.
Thank you. I'm going to hand it over to Councillor Falconer.
Thank you. Through your review to Dwayne. Does these studies have to be undertaken if we maintained ownership of the property but repurposed it? Through any repurposing, we would still have to do these studies?
Through your worship, it would depend in terms of what the property was for. So in terms of if we were to maintain ownership, but we were to decide that we wanted it for residential purposes, for example, wanted to tear down the buildings and put residential on it, we would still need to do the environmental assessment, if that's what you're referring to. But if we were to, so I guess as far as, it's not so much based on ownership, it's based on the intended land use. So whether we do it or whether the private sector does it. The other thing I'll maybe put out there, and certainly I'm doing some research on this, there is some funding available through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. And I've started doing a little bit of research on that, looking at whether or not there's any opportunity for us to apply for any funding for this particular property or this initiative. So again, I'm at the preliminary stages. I've pulled information off their website, but in terms of the next step, what I'd like to do and need to do is to reach out to staff at FCM to find out whether or not this project might be eligible or could be considered for any possible funding. So I'm not, I guess, just in terms of the figure that is currently drafted in the budget, that's based on no external funding is received. But I mean, if we were successful in receiving some external funding, then certainly that would enable us, you know, to perhaps do more on the property in terms of the environmental assessment research, or you know, it may result in us using less of that 85,000. So that's something certainly that I'm looking into.
Okay, thank you. That was just my concern was that we have some projects in the development stage, you know, that we're looking at relocation of the library in town, and we're also looking at possible adding a place for daycare. And I just wanted some of those properties seem to be quite useful in that in some of those respects to maintaining the ownership of it ourselves. So thank you for answering that question. Thank you.
Go ahead, Anita.
Yes, I was wondering if anybody ever looked into selling the building as is, if that's a possibility, and if that is something we can look into this year, and then if Dwayne continues with, see if there's funding available, put this on the agenda or on the budget for next year, and leave it out for this year.
Can I just one thing I want to let Kevin know and everybody know at the last county council meeting, there's no funding coming through from upper tier governments for new daycare spots. So this year we can work on it, but we know that it'll be the following year because there's a lot of funding comes from provincial to keep the daycare going. I'm going to throw this out at you, only thoughts that I'm having. I'm wondering, with all the staff has put into this and where we stand, if we shouldn't just let everything stand the way it is and move forward. We can always take it out. And here's where I'm going with that. We haven't seen our actuals yet. The next time we have a meeting, we're going to have our actuals of 2000 and whatever year this is, 20, on your finances. And it could be devastating or it might be good. But at that point, as everybody's pointed out, that's where we're going to have to make, again, tough choices probably about what to cut out. We already know the first thing we're going to cut out is going to be the ACDEV person. But I think that's been very clear from my council right now. And so I'm just going to go around the horn here so we can maybe kind of wrap this up. Your thoughts, everyone. We don't have actuals. We don't know if we're going to be in debt for 2020, which we have to add to the tax base for 2021, or if we're going to have relief. And it has a big, big play. So I'm wondering if we can just go around the horn on this one and just have everybody speak to it, and then we'll make a decision to move on, whether we take it out, leave it in, stand still, or what you'd like to do. Kevin?
The only thing I can say about the budget is I've from COVID aspect, it's changed my way of thinking on our budgets quite a bit. The weighing out the things that we want to add and whether they're going to be fruitful or not, and the past things that we've done to move forward. And I've always thought of myself as being one that would want to reduce taxes at any one time, but as a cost benefit, these ones that have been put forward, the ideas for this budget, any one of them is still moving forward, and I would agree to any of them, unless I really don't like the 6.48. But what you get out of it versus what it's going to cost you, I think is quite reasonable. So I think somewhere in the middle myself. But thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's go to Anita next.
Yeah, I would. Why do you think it's important to see your actuals for? It is important to see the actuals for this year, but why can't we? We're moving ahead with this anyways. Otherwise, we didn't have to have this meeting if we were doing this. I would like to take all the extras out because of COVID. Next year we will have. This year we have the same assessment as last year. Next year, our assessments will go up. We'll have a tax increase, probably because of that. So we will have more income and hopefully more money to spend on issues and things like this. So I would like to take them all out for this year.
Okay, we've got one vote for in and one vote for out.
So Reeve Bailey, if
I can't say that, I know, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, so if you were going to go down that route, you would want someone to put a motion forward, and then so I have drafted something here of what Councillor Palmer originally had put forward. If there's benefit in me reading something like that as a starting point, or council can feel free to amend it as they wish. But you'll notice in agenda item 7 there was a draft motion there, and we would just amend that motion based on what is included or excluded, right? So ideally, the council of the Township of North Huron would adopt the budget in principle, and whatever is to be excluded or reduced, we would just include that in that motion, right? So if council wanted to adopt it in principle, exclusive of the $50,000 for economic development officer, and with the funds for the asset management reserves being reduced to 50,000, which is what Councillor Palmer suggested. We could put a motion like that forward. It could be exclusive of all three. It could be a reduced number, but you'll want to go through that before you kind of go one vote for this, one vote for that. However you wish to proceed, but you should do it through a formal motion would be my recommendation.
My apologies, I got ahead of me. Would somebody like to make a motion?
Oh, and I
Reeve
guess,
Bailey,
yeah.
may I make a comment before you go that far? So just from listening to council, my take on this is that the moving forward on the Blythe properties assessment seems to be one of council's priorities if we could figure out how to pay for those. And so my suggestion would be on those is that we, and in speaking with Dwayne, to move forward on those isn't going to be a significant burden on staff time because it would be more so consultant work. So a suggestion I would like to throw out so that we could move forward on that would be to borrow that $85,000 from ourselves, and then if we are able to, if all these studies are done and we're able to sell the property, then we could recoup the $85,000 out of the sale proceeds. And I totally understand that that could be a 2-year process, but us holding on to the $85,000 for 2 years is not going to be a detriment to, we'll be able to handle that. Then if we find out though partway through the process that the properties are not saleable at all and that we have to keep them because of the contamination that may or may not be there, who knows, that's what the studies show us. So if it turned out that they were only suitable for a parking lot, then at that time that's going to be on into 2022. Then we could budget to pay reserves back for whatever amount out of the 85, or it could be the whole 5. We could budget for it in 2022 when things look a little better to actually pay that cost. So what I'm trying to do is come up with a solution that you can move forward on this without affecting the taxes for 2021 and still get you moving ahead on this one particular project. So I guess I'm just wondering, is that palatable to council? Or I guess I'm still trying to concern, was this one project your very most important? Anita, we can't see Bernie, so I'm going to ask you to speak if you would.
Yes, thank you very much, Donna. I think that's a fantastic idea. I think anybody talked about that, but you're the financial person. Thank you very much. It will drop down cost if we go that road because we don't have the building anymore. So insurance and all the associated costs will be down. I think that is a good idea. Thank you.
So if I could just jump in here for a second. So Reeve Bailey did get kicked from the meeting there, and he's having trouble reconnecting. So Deputy Reeve Sipe, you'll want to assume the chair as we go forward.
Thank you, Carson.
So am I hearing correctly, Deputy Reeve Sipe? And if you then can just make sure I'm understanding then, is that we would be pulling out the economic development, we would be taking out the economic development $50,000. We would be taking out the $100,000 asset management unless you want to change it by $50,000. And then the $85,000 would stay in, but it would be offset by borrowing revenue. So it would make no impact. It wouldn't make any impact on the budget. So those are the 3 items that we're looking for direction. So I guess to clear up then, would the asset management dollars stay at 0 or 50,000? And then we can we can go forward for the rest.
To do is I'm going to ask Councillor Palmer that, as he was the one that began the discussion about what the changes are, is something, after all the other comments have been made, is there anything in there that you would be interested in making a motion for those changes?
Well, it's really nice to know about the 85 and how it would be handled. So it's not adding. I do believe we need to keep up with reserves. And I would make a motion that we add in 50,000 for the asset management reserves.
So I'm going to do what I'm going to just confirm the motion so Carson can get a clear what the three things are saying. So the motion would be that the 50,000 economic development officer would be removed. The reserve transfer to asset management would be 50,000, not 100,000, and we would maintain the $85,000 for the public works assessment, but it would be offset by borrowing internally, and therefore no increase to the the spending, and therefore no increase to the taxation of the municipality. Is that correct? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Carson, you have that?
Yep. So the one piece that I'm still looking for direction on was that the economic development officer discussion be deferred to a future council, be left out of the budget, but be deferred to a future council meeting once staff have a clearer indication of both the actuals and the total transfers to reserves. Would council still like for that discussion to occur, or if council wants to drop it completely, to not be considered at a future date, then we would leave it out of that motion.
Based on the conversation that I've heard, I got the assessment that council is okay to have the discussion in the future. Correct me if I'm wrong, council. Correct me if I'm wrong, council. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's Chris. Thank you. I can, okay, if we want to talk about it sometime in the future when we see need, then it's worth a discussion. Everything's worth a discussion. So yes, sometime in the future.
Okay, so then your draft motion here would be that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby adopts the 2021 budget in principle, exclusive of the $50,000 for the Economic Development Officer, and with the funds for asset management reserves being reduced to $50,000. And further, that the $85,000 for assessment remediation for the Blythe Public Works property be borrowed internally. And further, that the Economic Development Officer discussion be deferred to a future council meeting once staff have a clearer indication on the actuals and the total reserve and the total transfers to reserves for 2020. And further, that council directs staff to have the budget presented for final adoption at the February 1st, 2021 regular meeting. And further, that the tax rate bylaw be brought forward for adoption once all tax rate information becomes available. So I don't have a mover and a seconder on that.
Do I have a mover for that? Do I have a mover for that motion? I have Councillor Faulkner moves it. Do I have a seconder? Oh, Councillor McBurney seconds.
Question?
Yes, Councillor Palmer, go ahead.
We haven't discussed the entrance ramps to the town hall. It seems to have been buried. The discussion has been buried somewhere. And when will we talk about that? We still have option A and B to look
So
at. It was sent
through
to
your worships. So I could clarify that. So as follow up from the December 21st meeting, myself and the Director of Public Works met with the Huron County Accessibility Advisory Committee. We went over what the project would look like, some context for the project, what the two options would entail, and they wrote us back a report with their recommendations in there. And basically at the February 1st council meeting, we will be bringing that staff report forward with the recommendations of the Accessibility Advisory Committee. But regardless, I don't believe whether what options chose will not impact the budget, as I believe we were planning to recommend that if there was additional funds required, we would pull those from both the accessibility reserves that we're transferring, as well as modernization reserves should they be needed. But we would have more actual costs as once an option is decided. The Director of Public Works is on here too. I don't know if she wants to add anything else from that discussion, but.
No, through your worship. Yeah, we did have that meeting and the report didn't get back to us in time for us to meet the e-scribe or the meeting deadline. So I was not able to provide a report during this meeting. That's the only reason why it's not was not mentioned today, but you will get a report February 1st.
So what I'm hearing is the ramp is in the budget. It hasn't changed. The discussion is whether when we're going to move forward, and that was a request by council to bring more information as it relates to accessibility and all that stuff to the next meeting. So to your point, Councillor Palmer, I don't think it's changed. The process is still moving forward. It is budgeted, and how those funds are going to be paid for are being dealt with by staff accordingly to ensure that the budget is not impacted thus far. Does that answer your question, Councillor Palmer?
As long as we can still discuss it, because there still was two options to deal with, and according to the building inspector, both of them were satisfactory. And I just want more talk.
Councillor Palmer, there has been no final decision been made. So Councillor Palmer, your comment or your notation that more discussion has to be had is noted, because that's going to happen.
Great.
So that motion is on the floor. There is a mover and a seconder. So unless there are any other comments, I will call the recorded vote. So Deputy Reeve-Sipe.
Yes.
Councillor Falconer.
Yes.
Councillor Heffer.
Yes.
Councillor Van Hittersum.
Yes.
Councillor Palmer.
Yes.
Councillor McBurney.
Yes.
And Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
Deputy Reeve-Sipe, would you mind finishing out the meeting, because I don't have a strong signal here. You might lose me again, and you guys seem to be holding on to your own. Is that okay? Sorry, Trevor, I didn't catch that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. So, Deputy Reeve-Sipe, may I just summarize for a moment and talk about the impacts for change? So what we've just done then is we've taken the budget from increase in spending of 6.48 down to 3.47. So just to recap then, we took out the $50,000 for the economic development position. We are self-funding the $85,000 from reserves or borrowing from ourselves. So that has no impact on the budget. But we've reduced the asset management contribution from 100 down to 50. So in effect, from our base budget, we've actually only added then $50,000 to this budget. Instead of, we were going to be adding 214 if we had accepted all three of these items. So, so then what that means is our total spending increase is now $213,084. So, Carson, are you able to share a couple of those slides, a couple of my tax rate slides for me, please, for a moment? Okay, so, oh, can you go back one for a moment, Carson, the previous one? Okay, so in effect, what you have adopted here is actually change B, $50,000. It's not for the economic development officer now. It's a $50,000 increase to the asset management reserve. So what I'm saying to you then is confirming to you that the overall budget spending increase then would be $213,084.44. So how does that look? So Carson, if you would flip to the next slide for me, please. So again, we're looking at option B because we've now added $50,000 to the budget. Again, it wasn't originally what we thought when I prepared these slides, but that's what it's turned out to be. So as part of the budget process, what we tried to do is look at a sample home. So we follow this one particular home and it's assessed at $205,000. As was noted, this particular house has had no change in assessment from the previous year because it didn't have any, alterations or whatever. So when you look across line B there, as I said, our spending increase would now be 3.47, adding $50,000. And so then this property in Wingham assessed at $205,000 is now in 2020, it paid $2,944.16. Now it's going to pay $2,967.82, or an increase of $23.66. Blythe would now pay $2,333.46, up $47.70, and East Wallinosh would now pay $2,109.97, or an increase of $71.06. So how did we get there? So a couple of things to note is that on this same house, as you can see, it's substantially more expensive for this same house to sit in Wingham than East Wallinosh, for example, because in Wingham, this same house is going to pay $857.85 more, which primarily relates to the policing costs. That's where the differences are. Now, Wingham for the second year in a row has had a huge decrease in their policing costs. So even though as part of our base rate, Wingham would have paid the largest portion of the base rate, the cost that everybody shares, they had such a huge decrease in policing costs because of that large credit that we got from the OPP. So that has brought Wingham's increase down very substantially for the second year in a row, which we're happy to see Wingham coming down the way we had hoped it is. But still, you can see how significantly more Wingham pays than the other two if this property was in the same location. So as I said, the other two wards also saw a decrease in their area rating, but it still didn't make the big difference that Wingham is seeing. And so, as I said, even though this wasn't a reassessment year, there was some increase in assessment for new builds, and most of that was in Blythe. And so that did help Blythe somewhat overall. But that's kind of the differences on how we get to where what a property would look like. So then, Carson, if you wouldn't mind, then this is option B. So under my tax rate impacts, you know, there's the 5 scenarios. Can you flip forward to those for me, please?
Those are all the slides I have, Donna. I have this one here.
It's under, sorry, it's under the next, it'll be under the, is it under the tax impact section?
If it's in this slideshow, that's all
No.
I have. You
No.
like, are you talking the PDF?
No,
PDF.
it's in the next section, Carson.
There
It's
is.
separate. It's separate from this.
Yeah, this is the only PowerPoint I have, Donna.
No, it's not a PowerPoint. It's the next section, the
Yeah, so the PDF, like the PDF, the property specific impacts.
yeah, so move
Yes.
off of that one, go down to the next one. Isn't tax impacts?
Donna,
Yeah.
we have that one. So we can see that one. It's document number A on
Yeah.
your PDF document.
Yes.
We have it, so the municipality, so Carson doesn't, that one.
Okay. Okay. So can you go to B, Carson? There. Okay. So if this is an example then, as I said to you previously, now we are looking at a 3.47% increase. So some of you will be very familiar with these particular properties. And so this shows you the same properties that we follow year by year, how adding that $50,000 will impact your own properties. So do you understand that? And that's what I wanted to do, was take a look at here and see these properties and see the actual dollars. Like I gave you previously, I gave you the example of the sample property. If it was a property that sat in Wingham, Blythe, and East Wawanosh, so you could see how that same property is what taxes it pays for the very same property in each ward. But this is the examples that we use each year of very specific properties that you're familiar with. And it just shows you the impact on those particular properties. So that's what I wanted you to have a look at this example B, just for further information. So does council understand that? Do you have any questions then on the PowerPoint slide, which I was showing you the impacts on the $205,000 sample assessed property, and then versus these particular properties that we review each year?
Donna, Kevin here, through you,
Yes.
Chair. The figures on the very right-hand side, the 0.56 and 0.58, is that the actual increase in taxes percentage?
That's the percentage increase based on those dollars.
Yes, yeah, okay. That's just, that answers my question.
Okay, thank you. And I thought I end up there.
Yes, Donna, I don't think the property in East Wawanosh is, there, so I don't know why that one was chosen. The 103,400, that is even below it, so I don't know.
Okay, so Anita, what we do is, this isn't intended to compare to the sample property. This is intended to show how the properties vary based on on their assessment, because some assessments are way lower, some assessments are way higher, some are at different classes. So you're exactly right. I wanted to show properties that are not the same as the sample property that we use. So this is a particular farm property with a house. that we follow the changes to this property year over year, just so that we can track and see what in dollars that property goes up.
I think we also follow another property, and this is because the tax rate in East Warman is going up way higher than in Blythe. That is of higher value in East Warmanos, if that's possible, and see it for comparison how much tax they have to pay more. Do you understand what I mean? Like if you pick another house from, like, say 500,000 or something like that, and see how much more taxes they have to pay. This is just one example for East Warmanos for a smaller house. And
Yes.
for the other, there's more comparison between the properties in Wingham and Blythe value-wise, how much more tax they have to pay. Am I clear or not?
So you just want to see more farm properties, more examples from East Wawanach.
More of especially the farmland is probably about all the same, but it's more the residential houses in East Wawanach that I would like to see another example.
Yeah. So actually last year, I believe yourself and Councillor Palmer picked this particular property for me to use. So if you two want to another property that you know of that you would like to see, then I could do that as well. But I just want to also make sure that my first slide comparing the exact same property in each of the 3 wards was showing how differently how much higher Wingham would pay and how much higher Blythe would pay. But then I certainly can, if you give me a property that you feel is a good example, because what you're saying, I have 2 or 3 properties, 2 properties from Blythe, for example, but only 1 from East Wawanach because it has 2 components. So I'm happy to do the calculation for a second property in East Wawanach if you can tell me a property that might be of use.
Okay.
Yeah. So you just email me
that.
Yes, that would be perfect. So,
thank you.
So council then.
Donna.
Yes.
So one question I heard, the one concern I do have is if councillors are picking properties, if the councillors don't technically own those properties, then they're gonna know. Then everybody's gonna know. Not that we know the names of these properties, but those 2 people now know private information about somebody's finances. Is that you as a municipal, somebody in the staff need to be able to pick a property without council being known of what that property is, because the argument is that is private financial information, regardless of whether we can determine it or not. That individual, I don't know somebody beside me how much they pay in tax because I don't know their assessment. But at the end of the day, that is private information. So I think we need to be cautious about who is picking these properties and who's using them for what information.
Yes, for sure. The assessment information on anybody's assessment is public information. And then all you have to do is apply the tax rate to it. So really, as I totally am aware of what you're saying, and we can, make sure that the property that we pick is not identified in any way, so that people don't know whose property it is that we're looking at. So a good point. As I said, we'll just make sure that, that it's not marked in any way that they can tell. But as I said, what I was trying to do here is to help you be confident in the motion that you've passed, to give you further information how this affects an average property and then how it affects random properties. So that's what the samples I was trying to do, without knowing what you were going to do with the budget, just to give you some options for today. So is there any other questions that I can help you with on these samples? Sorry, Deputy Reeves Sype, are you muted?
Well, yes, so sorry. Is there any other questions of council? I did want to mention that it was so as Donna has indicated, it was a $50,000 increase. However, the overall, like the way I read that table before was the overall increase. If you go to the original screen where you had what the increase was in spending, you had an increase in spending of all the above of 214,000. Don, I just want to confirm this. 214,042 is what you had in your report, and what we removed was the $50,000 economic development officer, and in essence we removed the 85,000 because we're going to do that through taxation, and then we reduced the asset management. I recall. So you saying that we just went up 50,000? I'm not collaborating with that information.
Okay, so if you look at the chart to see that our starting point was actually $163,084.44. That was our starting point.
So okay, so hold on. Yeah, so that's the difference, is because I'm starting with the whole. You said all of the above was 214. Like that council change wasn't a council change, that was a staffing change. You guys made those changes, not us.
Right.
And that's included in the 214,000.
Correct.
So basically from the total spending change goes from 214 and minus the stuff that we took away. That's the total spending change, not just the 50,000.
Right, because the 20,000 would be in there. A reduction is in there as well.
Right, but I mean the taxation stuff that we talked about had those numbers in. But when we talk about what the overall spending increase was, it's just not the 50. It's actually it's actually not 50. It's something a little different. But I wanted to understand that I couldn't understand the numbers you got to 50, so I was trying to collaborate to this page 324.
Okay, so just to go over once more. So in draft version 1, spending increase was the $184,000. Then staff made some small adjustments to reduce that down to $163,000. And now in essence, we've actually, the net change of what we've made today is adding additional $50,000, which brings us to $213,084.44. Is that clear, Trevor?
It is now. Like it is. It's always been to me, but it just couldn't. I wanted to make sure that the overall spending change from draft version 1 is not just the 50. It's the 50 minus the 20.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
So yeah, so 213,084.44 is now our new increase in spending dollars, which equates to 3.47%.
Okay. Can you unshare your screen, Carson, so I can see the rest of the stat? There you go. Thank you.
Okay, is there any further questions of me on these next or on those tax rate items? And then if I may, Deputy Reeve Sight, may I move forward to the next steps?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so we have council direction now, which is great. I really appreciate all your work on this, and I appreciate the work from staff because it's been quite a crystal ball exercise in some regard, trying to know how this COVID is going to affect us. So as we move forward, I believe then, Carson, if you just kind of nod your head, we have a motion that the budget is passed in principle then. And then what that means is then we would have to put a ad in the paper for next week because we have to notify the public that we're considering the budget at the February 1st council meeting. So at the February 1st council meeting, then I would have the public presentation at the meeting, and I would also give you a new copy of the budget with the actuals in it that I have at that point. And then to reiterate what Carson said, was when all the information is available on everybody else's tax rates, then at a later date, we would have to pass our tax rate bylaw. So that's a summary. Does anyone have any questions?
Chris does.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Reeve. This is a burning question, okay? Because we do not have a cross-border agreement, Section F is gone, and it pays for the soft costs from Morris Turnberry. They have said, and it's written down, that if we wanted to recover any money, any grant from them, we would have to apply. And that's a standard practice for any municipality. It's the only avenue we would have till we get an agreement anyway. So I'm just wondering why we didn't. Who decided that we weren't going to apply? Because to me, that's a money issue and it should have come to council.
Councillor Palmer, I will make comment of that is the application is that in 2021. 2020 has already been dealt with. 2020 was dealt with through the original agreement that was supposedly that was supposed to be on a gentleman's agreement that they would maintain the agreement until another agreement was reached. That was already committed at that point. That's the believement or the assessment that staff and most of council would indicate that that's what we expected. So 2021, what the comment is that they're saying we're going to pay you this. Morris Turnberry said we're going to pay you this, and in 2021, if you want something from us, you're going to have to apply.
Yes.
So we haven't applied yet. And it hasn't been come up to conversation with council because we're still working on trying to get an agreement. So
but they've set their budget already, according to the paper.
What? But I mean, absolutely, they've set their budget no different than us. But we're still working on an agreement. That's the agreement is part of the whole conversation. It's not this separation of soft services with just water. It's been all incorporating of all the stuff we've talked about with municipality. So council is aware of all this discussion.
We risk by not applying for this grant, we risk receiving nothing this year in 21. That's my concern.
But we
That's
also
my honest concern.
And I understand that council has been aware throughout the process about this Schedule F. So to say you don't know that anything about Schedule F, we have advised council that is the case. Whether we apply and get anything from our other municipalities, not necessarily Morris Turnberry, it could be Central Huron, it could be anybody around us. We're budgeting in the sense that we don't have that money. So that would be a positive assessment. So we're budgeting that we're not getting it. So if we do apply and get anything, it's going to be in the beneficial of the municipality. So Dwayne may want to add to this, but the council has been aware of the full implications of this Schedule F and the negotiating of the cross-border service agreement. So I don't want to elaborate any more other than the fact that council has been given aware and transparent about what's been going on.
And may I add, Deputy Reeves Sipe, that just to confirm once again, that we did receive $83,728 in 2020 from Morris Turnberry as for payment. It was reduced from the $118,500, but we did receive the $83,728. So just to confirm.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Deputy Reeves. So, yeah, I think just building on in terms of there was the application process that Morris Turnberry identified was geared towards nonprofit organizations. So it's similar to in terms of we have a process Donna puts out, I believe it's in around October, November, when we invite applications for nonprofits. Schedule F is not, it's part, or it has been part of an agreement. There's a signed document between, or that has now expired, I'll call it, between those two municipalities. And going back to the Reeve comment, the gentleman's agreement for continuation of that agreement for 2020. And so that, again, is a binding agreement between two municipalities with a verbal understanding that the terms and conditions of that agreement would apply for the balance of 2020. Morris Turnberry has prorated that payment, and that's certainly something that has been discussed by the cross-border committee members. In terms of 2021, that is, in terms of there's been, no conversation, I guess, in terms of 2021, in terms of what that is. As the Deputy Reeve has indicated, certainly the border committee is interested in working with Morris Turnberry to reach an agreement. We haven't heard from Morris Turnberry for quite some time now. So not entirely sure in terms of, other than what we're reading in the paper, we haven't received anything. So yeah, so nothing further to add, I guess, other than continuing on with the discussions.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Okay. So, are we looking just for the Carson, just for what's next, Carson?
Yeah, so Deputy Reeve, right now you're about to enter into agenda item 7, which is the next meeting. There was the draft motion there before, which is now null and void because of the previous motion passed. So the next meeting would just be, the budget will be presented for final adoption at the February 1st meeting. So we're good to move on to the confirmatory bylaw.
Okay, so I'll take a motion for bylaw number 5, 2021, being a bylaw of the Township of North Huron, adopt, confirm, and ratify matters dealt with by the Council of the Township of North Huron. Do I have a mover for that?
I'll make that motion.
Councillor Faulkner moves. Do I have a seconder? I see Councillor Palmer seconding. Clerk Lamb, go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Reeve. So Councillor Falconer?
Yes.
Councillor Heffer?
Yes.
Councillor Van Hitterson?
Yes.
Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sight, and Reeve Bailey's absent right now, so that motion carries 6-0.
So if there is no, if there is no further business, with the municipality, I would take a motion to adjourn this meeting at 12:18. Do I have a mover for that? I have Councillor McBurney moves. Do I have a seconder? I have Councillor Heffer seconding. All in favor? Oh, go ahead, Carson, sorry.
Thank you, Deputy Reeve Sight. So Councillor Heffer,
Yes.
Councillor Van Hittersum,
Yes.
Councillor Palmer, Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
Reeve Bailey is absent, so Deputy Reeve Sight,
Yes.
and Councillor Falconer.
Yes.
So that motion carries 6-0.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, council.